People who are living in heaven don't need to think about those living in hell. That was the right thing to say. But somewhere in the middle of nowhere, a young man in the cave kept muttering he had to look and watch till the end. He kept repeating those words dozens of times while wondering in his head. What if he is a person who was dropped into hell? So, this is how he now thinks of heaven. Every moment this young man was contemplating on the rock while staring blankly at the holographic screen in front of his face. Every second he kept repeating the words on the hologram screen to see through to the end, until finally he was tired and fell lying down asking why he had to do that. In his sleep, this young man heard two people talking about him in the cell, namely his younger sister, in the darkness of this dream. The young man realized that his name was Shinhyun, a name mentioned by one of the people who were talking in his dream. Shinhyun realized he was sleeping with his younger sister in the back seat of the car. Suddenly their car had an accident, and when he woke up, he was already in the mysterious cave. Shinhyun didn't know how much time had passed, and when he woke up, he didn't know where his family was. All he knew was that he woke up alone in a mysterious cave. All he got inside the cave was the Heavenly Martial Origin Cultivation art book, as well as a notification on the hologram screen, asking Shinhyun to keep watching until the end if he wanted to return home. This young man wondered if he studied the book, then he could return to his family. It was almost unbearable considering that he had been in the cave for so many years. The system finally announced that he had finished the tutorial. This young man was so shocked that he shed tears when he finally saw an exit at the end of the cave. But when the door appeared and he left, the place he reached was not the end of his world, precisely the earth, but an area called Murim. Shinhyun fell to his knees at the edge of a cliff, realizing he was in a very strange place. This young man screamed and asked why they did this to him. He shouted while continuously shedding tears for 10 years. He tried to survive in that terrible cave. Now he is confused about what to do to see the end of the world. Suddenly a strange middle-aged man appeared and greeted Shinhyun. The man said his family was starving, so the thin man wanted to ask for meat while brandishing his sword. Of course, Shinhyun was surprised to hear that. And to survive, he finally fought back and instead killed the strange man. He had to see the dead corpse with his own hands. This young man was so pretentious that he said over and over again that he was not the killer. He was confused and didn't know what to do. He had no choice, and he was sure others would do the same. In his mind, this young man kept asking he didn't know what he was doing. He was just trying to defend himself while holding the knife in his hand. But when he was stricken with extraordinary panic, suddenly, a holographic screen appeared and said that he had successfully leveled up. At first, he was confused reading the notice, but in the end he laughed in a horrid discordant voice as he looked at the message instinctively. Now he understood what had to be done. Now he understands that to level up and to return to his original world, he must reach the maximum level. Time flies so fast, and nowadays Shinhyun has been able to adapt to a new world. This young man finally carried the title of Supreme Swords Emperor, which meant the Supreme Sword Emperor. Now he was towering and gallantly pointing his sword at his defeated opponent. Shinhyun asked what generation of demonic gold his opponent was before his opponent could answer. Shinhyun interrupted by saying that his opponent was the 8th generation because previously, those who died at the hands of Shinhyun were the 6th and 7th generations of his opponents. This, because he was always looking for her, after decades, suddenly a very strong bluish ki energy appeared around Shinhyun's body. He said he really enjoyed this fight, but he still killed the Gold Chief. Right at that moment, one of the chairman's men appeared and wanted to attack Shinhyun with his sword. Luckily, the young man who now had very long hair managed to dodge in time. He also asked casually if it was okay for a demonic follower to swear like that. As soon as the young man got close to him, immediately pressed his face and made it stiff. Shinhyun said he really admired the young man's courage. Then he delivered an attack that made the young man's entire body stiffen and did not want to listen to his master's thoughts after quite a while, astonishing this young man with the illusion of his almighty strength. Shinhyun let go of this young man's face, saying if you want that kind of strength you need years or decades. It was fine to go back to learning a new demonic art and come back to see him and comfort him. Then Shinhyun said that the young man must become the new demonic cold leader. After that, he left the battle location which was so messy with a big smile on his face resting under a tree while throwing his sword carelessly. He said the leader of demonic gold this time wasn't good enough either. He wondered how to cheer himself up this time. Yon started thinking about creating an evil sect with supreme martial arts masters. He felt that everything was getting boring now that Shinhyun sat daydreaming, staring at the bright full moon. He said it had been 140 years since he had lived such a boring life. It's true, you heard right, it's been 140 years since he arrived in Murim. After that incident, his memory slowly began to dull. Shinhyun, who had started his determination to see the end of the world, was slowly starting to lose memory of the faces of his family members. Shinhyun thinks heaven is a place that has never existed in her life. Men today feel like they are living in hell every day. Now starts and thinks to end it all, but suddenly a hologram screen appears and says he has reached max level. The system says the restriction requirement has been removed, and the final level limit, that is ascension of a god, has been lifted, and Shinhyun will return to Earth soon. Shinhyun burst out laughing. He didn't expect to finally be able to return to Earth after such a long time. Shinhyun thinks they finally took pity on him when he was about to give up, or did they look down on him? Thinking of the ascension of a god makes Shinhyun suspect that he is believed to be at the level of the gods. But he felt strange, because if he was at the level of a god, then he should be free from worldly desires, but he was still filled with emotions that were once in his life. When he thinks back on his family, Shinhyun thinks his family is dead, because so much time has passed. He has long lost the desire to return to his original world. For him, it was just a vain dream. All that remains in Shinhyun is the desire for revenge against the one who made him go through the terrible state he is in now. He screamed loudly when he felt a strong flow of energy in his mind. This man just wants to kill, and keep on killing whoever it is, and wherever he is, Shinhyun will definitely kill him. A flash of energy that was so strong and powerful shone brightly into the sky when Shinhyun was sent back to Earth in 2011. The state of the Earth before Shinhyun had an accident. A goddess appeared and said that a day full of nightmares would come soon, and the goddess says humanity must evolve to fight the nightmare. So humanity mustn't squander the blessings bestowed upon them at that time when dungeons opened up everywhere and monsters appeared in strange corners of rooms. One says that this adventure has finally started and you must have been waiting for so long. I wonder who he is and why he looks so mysterious with a big chain around his body. Now we are shifting again in 2025, when the location is in Korea, to be exact, in the Red Wolf dungeon. A woman looks overwhelmed when she shoots a Red Wolf monster. She used the archer skill Strong Arrow to defeat the monsters that were trying to catch her comrades. The girl is apparently the team leader named Cha-Yun-Sol. She immediately asked her team members to leave that place when the young team member was praising the girl and saying thank you. Suddenly, a red wolf monster appeared and ate his shoulder. Instantly, Cha-Yun-Seol panicked and screamed for the young man's name, but she realized that she was too late because when she looked back, the other members of her team were also experiencing a similar tragedy. They were all attacked and eaten and even torn to pieces by the huge and terrifying red wolf monster, Cha-Yun-Seol. At this point, realizing that there was no end to the monsters and that her situation was getting desperate as his MP was almost depleted, Cha-Yun-Seol was worried that she would lose and die. Suddenly she heard someone running. Apparently it was a team member named Seojong-hyun. This girl tried to call him but was ignored, even though at this time Cha-Yun-Seol was already being pushed by dozens of red wave monsters. Meanwhile, Seojong-hyun continued to run as hard as he could to avoid monster attacks. He cursed inside his heart for joining a team of weaklings. Seojong-hyun realized that if he continued to be in that place, his fate would definitely be the same as his other colleagues. So this young man thought of getting out of the dungeon as soon as possible. But when he arrived at the dungeon gate, an arrow suddenly flew quickly and blocked his path. When Seojong-hyun looked back, apparently it was an attack launched by a Cha-Yun-Seol, who was now approaching him with very strong anger energy. This girl swore at Seojong-hyun and asked where the young jerk was going. Seojong-hyun tried to make small talk and said that he was happy to still be able to see leader Cha-Yun-Seol safe. He was very relieved even though the situation was chaotic, but Cha-Yun-Seol could no longer make small talk and spoke to him nicely. This girl immediately lifted Seojong-hyun's shirt and cursed right in front of his face with anger. Cha-Yun-Seol had warned from the start that this dungeon was too dangerous. Cha Yun-seol said the tragedy and death of their comrades is because of a weak and stubborn human like Seo Jung-hyun. Seo Jung-hyun was angry. He shook off the girl's hand and said that he was not the cause of the death of the Cha Yun-seol team. Cha Yun-seol realized that the young man's words were the true nature of Seo Jung-hyun. Cha Yun-seol turned around and said she was crazy for trying to talk to trash like Seo Jung-hyun, so Cha Yun-seol asked Seo Jung-hyun to go immediately and take cover under his father's armpit. The girl asked with scary eyes whether this time his father could still ignore his son's crimes after returning later. He immediately used his flagship skillstone Croudier to attack Cha Yun-seol. The unprepared girl was finally thrown when she was being hit. Cha Yun-seol's was thrown into a tree. When Cha Yun-seol was unconscious, Seo Jung-hyun approached her and then grabbed her hair while saying that Cha Yun-seol was an ignorant and stupid girl who didn't understand anything. Seo Jung-hyun asked with sarcasm tone, "Did the girl feel she was at the top after everyone praised her?" If Cha Yun-seol wanted to make her name even more famous, Seo Jung-hyun offered to help, so he said because she was too concerned with personal awards, Cha Yun-seol became a hindrance so that the last dungeon conquest failed and her entire team died. Seo Jung-hyun then raised his hands, which were full of fire, to deliver the final attack, while thanking Cha Yun-seol for her cooperation as the team leader. Suddenly, a thunderous thunder struck and fell right behind Seo Jung-hyun. Before he managed to strike Cha Yun-seol, from the lightning, a man appeared with ancient clothes and very long hair. The system popped up and said that he had reached internal level 50, which meant max. With this, he was successfully sent back to Earth. Cha Shin-hyun burst out laughing when he realized the reward for reaching the maximum level was returning to Earth. He found his hobby of killing people really disgusting, so he kept saying with a cold face that he would kill anyone. Suddenly, Seo Jung-hyun said that the strange man in front of him was having delusions because he spoke in a way like someone who was having delusions. Seo Jung-hyun swore at the strange man who suddenly came out of nowhere and said he wanted to kill this and wanted to kill that. This young man boldly considered Cha Shin-hyun to be a teleport or a magician. When Seo Jung-hyun asked who the strange man was, he was ignored because the man kept walking straight until he stopped beside Cha Yun-seol. Seo Jung-hyun boldly said that he and Cha Yun-seol were having a duel. But it seems that Cha Yun-seol will soon die in his mind. This young man started to panic when someone else found out that he and Cha Yun-seol were in a duel to the death. Seo Jung-hyun thought that no one knew what would happen if he let this stranger die. Seo Jung-hyun didn't know who the stranger in front of him was, but he had to make him shut up. So when Cha Shin-hyun was observing Cha Yun-seol's face closely, Seo Jung-hyun told him to leave, or he would also be beaten up by Seo Jung-hyun. With his hands raised, Seo Jung-hyun exerted his strength to hit Cha Shin-hyun, but suddenly a very strong bluish ki energy repelled Seo Jung-hyun. This young man realized that there was a dangerous energy that emerged from the body of the Cha Shin-hyun, especially when the strain man in front of Seo Jung-hyun stepped on the ground around him. It immediately cracked. It was clear that this made Seo Jung-hyun start to leave because of fear. Cha Shin-hyun walked up to Seo Jung-hyun while saying that he didn't realize someone was asking who he was. So now he will answer that he is the Supreme Swords Emperor, Cha Shin-hyun with scary eyes. This young man with long hair approached Seo Jung-hyun and touched his forehead, saying even though he had told his identity, it meant nothing to Seo Jung-hyun anymore. Because now Seo Jung-hyun was immediately shot with very strong energy. So strong that energy emits an extremely bright light and destroys the area around it by tens of meters. After he had had enough, Cha Shin-hyun stopped his attack and said that he was Cha Shin-hyun, Cha Yun-seol's older brother, even though the victim could no longer hear because his head had been crushed. At that young age, Cha Yun-seol still cried a lot and annoyed his parents and threatened him to leave Cha Yun-seol in that place. In the past, Cha Yun-seol loved the playground so much that she didn't want to go home. It was at that time that her older brother would approach her gently, asking if her younger sister really liked playground. The older brother said that if they continued to be in that place, they would trouble the father and mother. Cha Yun-seol hugged the doll tightly while asking if they go home now. When will they can meet again? Because the older brother, who will soon be going to college and will soon be busy studying. Again, with great patience, the older brother asked, "Doesn't Cha Yun-seol know that her older brother really loves her so? Even though he's busy in college, her older brother will always see her often?" At that time, Cha Shin-hyun said this while gently stroking his sister's head. Cha Shin-hyun also promised her to return to the playground when he returned home, after hearing that only then could Cha Yun-seol be able to smile and come home happily. She asked to be carried by her older brother, who happily granted his younger sister's wish. But suddenly that beautiful dream turned into a nightmare when they had an accident. Cha Yun-seol started blaming herself for being so stubborn back then. Little Cha Yun-seol realized when her parents had died and her brother was missing, and immediately screamed when she managed to wake up from her nightmare. A man by his side said that he cured Cha Yun-seol with his key. He also said that Cha Yun-seol's injuries were severe enough that it would be a little difficult to move around. Seeing the strange young man, Cha Yun-seol asked who he was. Cha Shinhyun knew that his sister would not recognize him because he was an adult, so Cha Shinhyun said that he could no longer carry Cha Yun-seol, not because he was heavy, but because Cha Yun-seol was now an adult. Cha Yun-seol was clearly shocked to hear that. Unknowingly, Cha Yun-seol's tears came out when she realized that in front of her was her older brother, Cha Shinhyun. With an irritated and touched face, Cha Yun-seol asked where his older brother has gone all this time. Seeing his younger sister's condition, he immediately hugs her to calm her down. But suddenly Cha Yun-seol pushes his brother's body when she remembers Sung Jong-hyun. This girl asked where Seo Jong-hyun was. Cha Shin-hyun said that the person who was meant to attack Cha Yun-seol earlier had died without a head. Cha Yun-seol was clearly shocked to see that her brother who had just returned had killed someone, especially Seo Jong-hyun. When Cha Shin-hyun asked what was wrong with that, suddenly Cha Yun-seol grabbed his brother's arm and asked Cha Shin-hyun to run away. Now finally, Cha Yun-seol invites her brother back to their old house. Inside the house, Cha Shin-hyun immediately ran to look around. She said it had been a long time since she left the house, but their old house had not changed much. When Cha Shin-hyun is busy, his younger brother looks gloomy and says that they are in big trouble because director Seo Kang-jin will definitely look for them. Cha Shin-hyun was surprised to hear the strange name, so Cha Yun-seol explained that director Seo Kang-jin was the director of the Dawn Guild and the father of Seo Jong-hyun. He used to be a member of a gang that was known for its sadism and cruelty. Apart from that, he is one of the best 11 in Korea. Cha Yun-seol said that they missed the time to report the situation due to fainting earlier, so Seo Kang-jin must have known that his son was dead. He would immediately suspect Cha Yun-seol because he was the only survivor. Cha Shin-yeon even asked why her sister was worried about that because later he would only have to kill Seo Kang-jin too. Cha Shin-yeon's confident smile when he said this made Cha Yun-seol exasperated and pinched his cheeks. Cha Yun-seol told her brother to speak more rationally. Cha Yun-seol explained that Seo Kang-jin was above level 50. He became the director because he was very strong, and secondly thought his brother's nickname was very bad because now no one uses the name Supreme Swords Emperor. Cha Yun-seol also asked why her older brother was now speaking in a strange tone when Cha Yun-seol asked why her older brother was like this now. After returning after 14 years of missing, Cha Yun-seol kept screaming and complaining about many things, including the departure of her parents and the loss of her older brother. She wondered where his older brother had gone all this time and why suddenly appeared. But suddenly, Cha Yun-seol's criticism stopped when she saw her older brother were concentrating on staring at their large family photo. Cha Shin-hyun understood that now both their parents had died, and he explained the reason for his now strange speech, because all this time he lived in a place called Murim. Why was he there? Cha Shin-hyun felt it was too complicated to explain, but for now he needed to understand the situation in this world right now. So Cha Shin-hyun asked, "What is a hunter? What is a guild? And does this world also have a level concept too?" For a moment, Cha Yun-seol was pensive. When asked by her older brother where he was going, Cha Yun-seol answered that he would go to the guild. When Cha Yun-seol had left, Cha Shin-yeon went straight to his room, opened the door handle, and said that nothing had changed since before he left. It feels like yesterday he was still in that room at this time. Cha Shin-hyun thought about what his sister said about his bad name as the first step to becoming a good brother. Cha Shin-hyun had to think of another nickname. But Cha Shin-hyun suddenly remembers Seo Kang-jin's name and intends to look for him right at that moment. He suddenly notices the presence of several people outside their door. Apparently, now there is someone scary with a strong body standing at the main door of their house. One of the people raised his hand and immediately kicked the door open with his strength. A man who stood in the middle and looked the oldest immediately asked where Cha Yun-seol was. Apparently he was Seo Kang-jin, the director of the Dawn Guild, who they should have avoided at this time. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Dawn Guild, the second-generation guild in Korea, Cha Yun-seol had just finished parking her car. Cha Yun-seol was worried that if Seo Kang-jin had acted first, She was worried that if she entered the magnificent building, she would be caught by Seo Kang-jin. This girl is wondering who to ask for help with this problem. While being stricken by confusion and sudden fear, a woman called Cha Yun-seol from behind. When seen apparently, it was Lee Ji-hae, the vice chairman of the Dawn Guild. The question is what Cha Yun-seol is doing there, because she should be doing dungeon conquest with team leader Seo Jong-hyun. Lee saw the wound on Cha Yun-seol's left arm, then asked gently if something had happened, instead of directly answering Cha Yun-seol, instead wondering if Lee was one of the best hunters in Korea. This very loyal and fair and unpredictable character can be trusted, but this is the only choice Cha Yun-seol has now, so by making up her mind. Cha Yun-seol started explaining everything to Lee Ji-hae. Meanwhile at home, Cha Shin-hyun scolds Seo Kang-jin for not knocking on the door during a visit to the other person's house. The young man who came with Seo Kang-jin was annoyed to hear Cha Shin-hyun's long-winded words, but Seo Kang-jin stopped them and immediately asked where Cha Yun-seol was. But Cha Shin-hyun even said he knew the reason Seo Kang-jin was looking for Cha Yun-seol. So Cha Shin-hyun openly said that he was the killer of Seo Kang-jin's son named Seo Jong-hyun. Seo Kang-jin's face immediately turned red when he heard this. He became inflamed, screaming, and immediately released his inner strength, knowing that his son's killer was in front of him. Instead of being frightened by the strength of Cha Shin-hyun's opponent, he smiled happily and said that this is how his opponent should be. He said he wanted to see how strong Seo Kang-jin was. Seo Kang-jin launched towards Cha Shin-hyun with full power, while unsheathing his big sword. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a beautiful girl named Lee Ji-hae said she wanted to meet Cha Shin-hyun immediately after hearing from Cha Yun-seol that her brother had also just returned from Murim. When Seo Kang-jin directed his sword attack at Cha Shin-hyun, the young man with long hair managed to dodge it in time. The young man thought that Seo Kang-jin's sword was enveloped by some kind of mysterious power. He knew that basically sword's energy and sword aura were similar, but their origins were different. Cha Shin-hyun began to wonder if this was the so-called ability of those who were called hunters. Cha Shin-hyun remembered that a figure named Seo Jong-hyun yesterday also used a strange power. This young man smiled happily and said they were worth researching. Seo Kang-jin raised his sword with both hands, then used a zigzag motion to trick Cha Shin-hyun. When it felt close, Seo Kang-jin mustered his best strength to injure Cha Shin-hyun, now on purposely not avoiding to feel his opponent's attack after being hit by Cha Shin-hyun's opponent, commenting that apparently Seo Kang-jin's attack level is on par with the peak level of a martial arts master. He curses in annoyance that his opponent managed to block his ultimate attack from him with his body. In fact, Seo Kang-jin realized that he was the one who was pushed back with just one arm. Cha Shin-hyun, the young man with the Cha surname, asked with a terrible smile, "Is it true that basically there are 10,000 people in Korea at the same level as Seo Kang-jin?" Came with Seo Kang-jin to attack Cha Shin-hyun when he saw the leader getting pushed away, but they both managed to get rid of easily by Cha Shin-hyun. Suddenly, a third young man appeared and attacked Cha Shin-hyun with a fireball that was quite big and strong. The other youth and Seo Kang-jin, who were standing in the corner of the room, thought everything was over with the attack, and Cha Shin-hyun had already lost. A young man with a sword wanted to immediately end the fight by stabbing Cha Shin-hyun, but suddenly Cha Shin-hyun appeared right in front of his face while asking them to attack slowly and one by one. Then, with one squeeze, the young man's sword shattered in the hands of Cha Shin-hyun. He said that his opponent's attack this time exceeded his expectations. The short-haired man was shocked to see his sword destroyed, especially when Cha Shin-hyun released his inner strength, which formed a terrible bluish flame. It was clear he was panicking, but suddenly the fire went out, and Cha Shin-hyun cleaned his shoulder calmly, this young man's body without even the slightest scratch, even though he had been burned by Virgol from Cha Shin-hyun's opponent, remembering his sister's words. Even he had only disappeared for 14 years when he saw the three youths before him had reached the pinnacle of martial masters, a level where you must not only accumulate 1,000 years of experience and techniques, but also have to be born with extraordinary talent. It's shocking to see that humanity in this era can catch up to Murim in just 14 years. Moreover, there are very few people who can reach the pinnacle level of martial arts masters in this world like that Seo Kang-jin. Yan was really speechless about that fact, though they still haven't reached the top rank of martial arts master based on what Cha Shin-hyun heard. The ranking of Jiangnu doesn't include him. That's why he reached the top and wants to set the ranking again, until finally Cha Shin-hyun really got to the top by being the only victor after fighting all the martial arts masters. Meanwhile, in the car that drove through the evening streets, Cha Yun-seol was surprised because suddenly, the deputy guild leader wanted to meet her older brother. Normally, Cha Yun-seol obviously wouldn't hide anything from Cunning, because she came to ask for help from Lee Ji-hae. But Cha Yun-seol was still unsure whether she was a friend or foe. But Cha Yun-seol remembered what she said earlier, that she would help to the end about the incident about Seo Jong-hyun and director Seo Gang-ji, as long as Cha Yun-seol wants to meet her older brother, Cha Shin-hyun. And obviously Cha Yun-seol could not refuse the offer. Even so, Cha Yun-seol wondered what Lee Ji-hae was thinking, who was still busy pensive. Suddenly Lee Ji-hae asked if it was true that Cha Shin-hyun had suddenly disappeared a few years ago. Cha Yun-seol replied that her brother disappeared in 2011, so it's been 14 years now since then. Immediately, Lee Ji-hae was surprised to hear Cha Yun-seol's explanation. This short-haired girl knew that Cha Shin-hyun had been trapped in Murim 140 years. Inside her head, Lee Ji-hae could not even guess how strong Cha Shin-hyun was. Lee then changed the subject by asking what Cha Shin-hyun was like to Cha Yun-seol. She replied that her brother was a friendly and kind person, and above all else, Cha Yun-seol knows that her older brother really likes studying, and that her brother even managed to get into university without having to pay. From this, Lee knew that this was a very genius figure. Cha Yun-seol agreed with Lee Ji-hae's assumption that her older brother was a genius. But according to Cha Yun-seol, what is more important is her brother, who is persistent and really tough. Once starting something, he must see until the end. Moving into the house, Cha Shin-hyun even challenged the person who had managed to hit him with Virgil because he had never felt the sensation of an attack like that before. While talking, the young man with the sword came back to attack Cha Shin-hyun, but was stopped only with a light fist without looking back with a cold face. Cha Shin-hyun said he was not interested in the swordman because he panicked. The man with the Virgil just now took out blocks small ice with her magic circle. Of course, Cha Shin-hyun was not surprised to see this simple ice attack because he had experienced many tricks. That kind of ice in the ice palace now instead turned around to give an ice dragon-shaped attack that instantly froze its opponent. With a terrible smile, Cha Shin-hyun said that the ice attack was supposed to be like that, seeing his two friends fall so easily. The young man with a shield immediately ran helter-skelter, saying he wanted to live, but just as he wanted to go to the entrance, he felt a large, invisible barrier blocking him. Heading for the exit before he spoke more, Justin Yan had already shot him with one strike. Seo Kang-jin started to get annoyed because the last person who was supposed to stand as a shield instead ran away and eventually died. Cha Shin-hyun even said that gangsters apparently didn't really care about loyalty. At this point, Seo Kang-jin realized that his opponent was very strong because he could use ice barrier magic and death shot magic with one finger. Seo Kang-jin even suspects that Cha Shin-hyun is someone who is under a mysterious wizard system, but when he thinks about it, Gang-jin is sure that a wizard can't possibly withstand his attacks. Seo Kang-jin just realized that the house was not damaged, even though they had fought so fiercely. Seo Kang-jin accused Cha Shin-hyun of using some trick because he knew Seo Kang-jin and his group would come so prepared everything. Cha Shin-hyun calmly explained that he used his sword to cover the area because it had been a long time since Cha Shin-hyun returned to the house. Of course, he didn't want to let the gangsters dirty the floor of his house. Since someone like Seo Kang-jin would find it difficult to understand what he meant, then Cha Shin-hyun would keep it simple. Those who from the start entered his territory obviously would not be allowed to dirty him. Seo Kang-jin was irritated by such long-winded explanations and sounded belittled, so this old man was determined not to lose even alone. He exerted all his strength until he entered Berserker skill mode. With that mode, he went berserk and screamed as hard as he could. All his inner strength was used until his whole body radiated terrible red light. Cha Shin-hyun knew that the man in front of him was like a monster and increased his strength too fast. Cha Shin-hyun suspected that his opponent intended to die with him. Then Seo Kang-jin attacked him with all his might. Even his attacks were so fast and very agile. Cha Shin-hyun suspected that this opponent was out of his mind with a hot temper, just like one of the martial artists. Because this fight was really fun for Cha Shin-hyun, so he would show his respect to Seo Kang-jin. Cha Shin-hyun took the broken sword earlier and killed Seo Kang-jin with just one slash after his opponent fell. Kang-jin must be proud because he received an attack from the Supreme Sword's Emperor. A few moments later, Cha Yun-seol arrived home with Lee Ji-hae, of course. Cha Yun-seol invited her guests to enter in a friendly and polite manner. When she was surprised to find the door of her house open, apparently she was made even more surprised when she saw her brother mopping up the blood on the floor. His sister immediately exploded and asked her brother what happened. Cha Shin-hyun tried to ask his sister not to be surprised at his housewarming party. How could Cha Yun-seol not be surprised, and even more annoyed when her brother said that? While squeezing the cloth covered in blood, Cha Yun-seol exploded and screamed angrily again. When asking why her housewarming party was filled with blood, Cha Yun-seol asked with all her might why her brother kept causing trouble since returning. Seeing his sister's anger expressing her sister's angry expression was really good, so if she went to Murim, it would definitely be the most powerful person there. Suddenly, Cha Shin-hyun realized the existence of Lee Ji-hye, who was still standing silently behind Cha Yun-seol. He felt that the energy of her eternal art was able to resonate with his Heaven 5 trial origin cultivation arts, and that she could even use voice transmission via telepathy. So he asked who this Lee Ji-hye really was. From within her mind, Lee Ji-hye said that not only Cha Shin-hyun had left that place. Suddenly, one sunny day he woke up with a surprised attitude as if he remembered something, and immediately ran out of the room in a hurry. Cha Yun-seol immediately called his older brother's name with a worried face. Suddenly a soft voice answered whether Cha Yun-seol had really woken up. The figure of Cha Shin-hyun, who has now cut his hair and is wearing normal youth clothes in Korea, is standing in front of the mirror, smiling to greet his little sister. He asks if Cha Yun-seol is worried that he will disappear again. Cha Yun-seol feels relieved inside knowing that her brother's return was not just a dream. Kan-sol also asked why his brother woke up so early before Cha Shin-hyun could answer his phone ringing, and he said goodbye. It's been a week since Cha Shin-hyun came back, but to Cha Yun-seol it still feels unreal to him that day. Vice Chairman Lee didn't leave anything for Cashin and just said, "Let's meet again soon," before just disappearing. Immediately afterwards, the men in black appeared and handled the corpses of director Seo Kang-jin and his underlings. The next day, reports about Seo Jung-hyun appeared on the news along with news of Seo Kang-jin's sudden retirement. From this, Cha Yun-seol knew that Lee Ji-hye kept her promise as the only survivor, and the person responsible for yesterday, Cha Yun-seol, was put on long-term probation from the guild. That day, Cha Shin-hyun was called by Lee Ji-hye, making Cha Shin-hyun wonder what she wanted from her older brother. Cha Yun-seol hopes that her older brother, Cha Shin-hyun, will return safely. Lee Ji-hye sits in the living room, which is decorated with ancient ornaments identical to wooden ornaments. Even this beautiful girl sits on an ancient round wooden chair and table, saying that Lee does not look worried, even though he is always being watched by other people. Lee smiled and said that Cha Shin-hyun apparently had realized it. This girl said they weren't monitors, but just guards. Cha Shin-hyun sat and enjoyed the tea served by this young man, realizing that the tea tasted very familiar. Seeing the expression on Cha Shin-hyun's face, Lee knew that this young man recognized the taste of the tea she was giving. Said that it was Junshan Yinsen tea, which was a very precious tea in ancient China. Lee said she often stopped by Honam to drink this tea. Of course, when she was still in Murim, Cha Shin-hyun was happy. The girl in front of him spoke straight to the point. And then Lee also said that there were 3 people who had been confirmed to have returned from Murim, namely Cha Shin-hyun. Lee Ji-hye is the leader of the Dawn Guild, and Park Tae-hoon is the leader of the Twilight Guild. Dawn and Twilight are 2 organizations that share influence in the Korean Hunter Association. Currently, there is a rift between the two with quite a complicated animosity, but back in the day before Lee compared the story with Park Tae-hoon, a few things were revealed. One day in 2011, the young man named Park Tae-hoon opened his eyes in a mysterious cave on one side of the cave. There was a book called Heaven 5 Trial Origin Cultivation Hard, and after he left the cave he found himself in a strange world called Murim. Apparently this incident was very similar to what Cha Shin-hyun and Lee had experienced themselves. Lee also received a notification from the system. If he wanted to return to his original world, he had to see the end of this world. Lee said that Cha Shin-hyun returned to his original world after many years, and the Earth had entered the era of hunters and dungeons. Lee Ji-hye assumed whether this was an assignment or a plot from a higher power. We don't know, but how the world changed and their departure to Murim was definitely connected. Also asked how much one knows about hunters and dungeons. Cha Shin-hyun said that 14 years ago, after the divine revelation came down from the goddess of dungeon monsters and hunters, the class system and skills began to appear. Not much different from the RPG games they had been before, except when they were little. More importantly, Cha Shin-hyun wanted to know how Lee Ji-hye and Park Tae-hoon could return to Earth. Lee Ji-hye answered that they came back after death. Lee asked if that was not the same as what happened to Cha Shin-hyun himself. Cha Shin-hyun's body trembled, and a dark aura appeared when he heard Lee's sly answer. He remembered the system word for seeing the end of the world. This young man was truly shocked that he could return in such a fashion. Cha Shin-hyun wonders if the goddess knows who sent him to Murim, and why sending Cha Shin-hyun to Murim is just like a gift, because maxing out his martial arts level is by returning to Earth, then there should be a gift as well. Because he succeeded in maximizing his novel as a hunter later, the prize will definitely be the answer to Cha Shin-hyun's question. Even then, if she didn't want to lose her face as a goddess, Cha Shin-hyun asked Lee Ji-hye why she didn't immediately say her intention in approaching Cha Shin-hyun. Lee sighed and asked Cha Shin-hyun for a walk to talk about this. First, Lee told that the Dawn Guild was facing Park Tae-hoon from the Twilight Guild. They were facing their opponents carefully, in a situation where they didn't know what would happen later, until finally director Seo Kang-jin died because of Cha Shin-hyun. After killing the main force behind the Dawn Guild, namely Seo Kang-jin, Cha Shin-hyun had to be responsible. So Lee Ji-hye asked Cha Shin-hyun to join the Dawn Guild. He will be given the position of an executive. Even Lee Ji-hye can promise unimaginable wealth and fame. Lee says that it's not a bad deal. Wright replies that this offer came from his sister's boss to ignore. But this young man still refused. Lee Ji-hye was clearly surprised and asked why Cha Shin-hyun replied that he liked to act alone. Moreover, serving someone lower than himself felt nothing great for Cha Shin-hyun. Lee was silent for a moment, hearing Cha Shin-hyun's answer. Then she proposes to test it to find out who is weaker between the two of them. Cha Shin-hyun rubbed his chin in thought. Then he said that Lee Ji-hye should know that 1 year in Murim is equal to 10 years on Earth. Then Lee Ji-hye would have known that Cha Shin-hyun spent 140 years of his life in Murim. Lee replied that age and skill don't always match. Cha Shin-hyun agrees with the girl's idea, but still he thinks that people who have only spent 300 years in Murim are still weaker than him. Without answering Cha Shin-hyun's words, she immediately took out her strength and opened the barrier between them. From the outside world, this is Lee's original skill, which is commonly called shadow dance. Looking around and noticing her senses were cut off, the surroundings had turned cloudy, and the area affected by this skill was 50 meters wide. Recreating an art this large with just the laws of physics would take a great deal of time and energy. Lee Ji-hye explained that this was her original skill, so they were currently in a temporary dimension that mirrored the real space they were currently in from the outside. They both just suddenly disappear. Lee also says she is called Blue in Plum Blossom. While still in Murim, this girl never failed when it comes to killing. Previously, seeing the ability of his opponent, Cha Shin-hyun knew that Lee was an assassin who was willing to fight to the death. Even though her hands were tied, Lee said that if he wanted to get out of the room he had created, the method was very simple. Either Cha Shin-hyun destroyed himself, or Cha Shin-hyun died at the hands of Lee Ji-hye, who now carries 2 large swords in both hands. Instead of being afraid of Lee's scary expression, he joked that this was a murder in broad daylight, but he knew that Lee Ji-hye's skills did not include trapping enemies without much further ado. Lee launched an attack on Cha Shin-hyun, until his sharp blade now right on Cha Shin-hyun's neck. With a cold expression, this woman said of course she didn't mean to just trap. Cha Shin-hyun casually dodging Lee Ji-hye's attack, which was right at his neck. But Lee didn't give up easily. She continued to deploy attacks that were barrage and very ferocious, even though Cha Shin-hyun was always managed to dodge her attack. No matter how fast the attack was, then Lee Ji-hye delivered a finishing blow that was strong enough for Cha Shin-hyun to be knocked back several times. Cha Shin-hyun noticed the dagger in Lee Ji-hye's hands, and one of them was held upside down and with a strange fighting style. This young man immediately recognized that it was the world's greatest assassin martial art. Murim, the Moonlight Blood Road. Lee was impressed that his opponent immediately knew the name of her attack with just one look. Cha Shin-hyun smiled and said he had fought someone who used that skill before, but due to his lack of experience at the time, he was accidentally able to kill his opponent in an instant. Lee explained that she had not finished talking. This young man said he would allow 3 styles to fight him if Lee Ji-hye managed to beat Cha Shin-hyun with one of his 3 styles. Then Cha Shin-hyun was willing to join the kill down. Then Cha Shin-hyun thought the attack just now was his first. After hearing Cha Shin-hyun's instructions with a cold face, Lee Ji-hye said that Cha Shin-hyun should do as she pleases. Surprised at Lee's ability, even though she was in Lee's domain, still saw that the girl could escape his senses, as if the girl was moving by vaporizing. So Cha Shin-hyun wonders if this is also part of the skill itself. Lee Ji-hye creates several energy patterns right above Cha Shin-hyun's head. Instead of panicking, realizing the attack looked dangerous, Cha Shin-hyun chuckled instead. Then he crouched down to prepare to jump or dodge the sneaky attacks that turned like missiles that chased him, using his own strength to parry Lee's swift attacks. After all the attacks were successfully parried, Cha Shin-hyun landed slowly on the ground, saying that one was quite impressive. Suddenly he had come again with a shadow dagger in his hand that was blazing with destructive energy. Fortunately again, he managed to fend off the attack with his strength. Smiling, the young man said that earlier was the second attack. Finally, Lee decided to retreat because his attack was once again easily parried by Cha Shin-hyun. This girl said that she had expected the strongest master who died at the age of 150 years. The Shaolin master, the person who was considered equal to her, must be the strongest person. Hearing the praise, just scratched his cheek casually. Lee was annoyed because this young man seemed to think his praise was just a normal thing. Suddenly, Lee became serious again when she took out energy spears from the ground with her strength. This girl said that she managed to kill Cha Shin-hyun. Will he become the strongest person in the Murim world? Smiled a little and belittled the words in front of him. He was really speechless hearing Lee Ji-hye's opinion. Even though Lee Ji-hye's energy spears turned into a storm and aimed at him, he was still standing casually. Lee took out the shadow dagger skill by swinging both daggers at the same time. Lee created a terrible attack that headed straight for Cha Shin-hyun. This young man calmly said the main swords that immediately created a terrible light to counter Lee Ji-hye's attack. The energy of the attack released by Cha Shin-hyun was so powerful that it made it difficult for Lee to hold himself upright. Suddenly, a very large stone was thrown right in front of Lee Ji-hye, who did not notice the stone's arrival. Lee panicked because she was so scared she couldn't move. This girl could only close her eyes when only an inch more of the boulder hit her, appeared, and with one punch managed to destroy the rock into small pieces with a calm face. This young man said the last style to attack him was done, so he asked Lee Ji-hye with a smiling face, "Does this girl want to continue the fight again with hands that are still shaking?" Finally, Lee Ji-hye said that she did not want to continue the fight, and herself admitted defeat. The barrier around them slowly dissipated, and they returned to the real world. Lee Ji-hye said she would not ask for another fight with Cha Shin-hyun. Instead, Lee Ji-hye asked to be told one thing. What had Cha Shin-hyun just done to her? Because Lee Ji-hye for a moment felt like she was facing an existence she shouldn't have fought against. Sitting relaxed as he explained that Lee Ji-hye's guess was not wrong, to beat an ordinary strongman in his space. Lee was a little surprised to hear that, so asked what realm Cha Shin-hyun had reached. Meanwhile, Cha Shin-hyun said that the effect of the combination of martial arts and skills was extraordinary. The fight earlier was also quite fun for Cha Shin-hyun. Finally, Cha Shin-hyun accepted the girl's offer to join the Dawn Guild, but with a note that the guild would provide support for martial arts and information. So Cha Shin-hyun will help this organization with his strength, but Cha Shin-hyun will do it as an outsider, and not as a member of the Dawn Guild. Lee could think of this as an alliance. Cha Shin-hyun just didn't like having to be under someone, but this didn't mean he didn't want help. After thinking long enough, Lee finally agreed to Cha Shin-hyun's idea, but with the promise that the young man with black hair would not work with the guild. Whatever happened, he sat down while saying he would promise on behalf of the Supreme Sword's Emperor. In the end, the two of them shook hands as a sign of agreement between the two. In his heart, Lee thought that the call also sounded too flashy for Cha Shin-hyun. Before their handshake broke, Cha Shin-hyun stopped watching her. So far, Cha Shin-hyun has held back because he is at his younger sister's workplace, but Cha Shin-hyun cannot guarantee that it will continue. Lee replied that she would not do anything to harm their relationship with Cha Shin-hyun. So of course, Lee would immediately get the guards to thank him for that. Suddenly, Cha Shin-hyun pulled his sleeve until it was torn, and then he gave the piece of cloth to the girl while apologizing because he had injured Lee just now. Lee was clearly surprised to see Cha Shin-hyun's gentle attitude, so that without realizing it, Lee accepted the cloth, and Cha Shin-hyun immediately apologized for making fun of Lee Ji-hye about her 3 skills. Actually, Cha Shin-hyun just wanted to confirm the true skill of a Master Supreme, and someone who was also a hunter. She looked a little awkward when she said this. Lee replied that she understood what Cha Shin-hyun meant, but she was fine. Instead, he was happy because he was able to fight at full power to bring out his long-buried killing intent. Cha Shin-hyun now understands why Lee Ji-hye only targets the dots of many other martial arts. Lee Ji-hye instead answered Cha Shin-hyun's question by asking another question about whether the young man had ever thought about wanting to, if he really wanted to kill someone. Cha Shin-hyun was silent, to be honest. That desire was still in his heart. He even well remembered the sensation when the system asked so easily, "Does Cha Shin-hyun want to return to his world? If yes, then see the end of this world." Words that always annoyed him every time he remembered that. Cha Shin-hyun clearly knew what Lee meant because he always thought of that, namely the desire to kill the person behind the system. Finally, Lee Ji-hye got back into her luxury car, which was parked at the edge of the park. The driver asked if the deputy guilt was okay, considering that he had just used the shadow dance skill. With a small smile, Lee Ji-hye replied that she couldn't even scratch Cha Shin-hyun with that skill. As he expected, Cha Shin-hyun had exceeded his expectations. Lee Ji-hye even ran out of stamina, and his softness even realized that during the match, he had not attacked him back. This tough girl doesn't even realize what Cha Shin-hyun is doing to block her attacks. As soon as he entered the house, he was immediately hugged by his sister. This young man was clearly shocked and asked why his sister was behaving like that. Cha Yun-seol asked her brother to be quiet because she wanted to talk with an innocent face. Cha Yun-seol asked her brother not to go anywhere else. From now on, he even asked his older brother not to do anything dangerous and to stay at home. Cha Yun-seol is really scared if her brother disappears again. Cha Shin-hyun immediately stroked his sister's hair gently, hearing her sister's request. Cha Shin-hyun said he really understands his sister's feelings, but he will become a hunter. Instantly, Cha Yun-seol's face became even more hideous when she asked if her brother wanted to die. As soon as the two of them sat facing each other in the living room, Cha Shin-hyun took out the mystery box that he got from Lee Ji-hye. From Lee, this young man knew he would get Windows status of a hunter after possessing the mystic box, so Cha Shin-hyun immediately held the mystic box with a sense of calm. The colorful box shone so brightly before slowly dimming and melting in Cha Shin-hyun's hands. Of course, Cha Shin-hyun was annoyed to see the box missing and empty. He asked his sister if maybe Lee was a fraud. Cha Yun-seol sighed in annoyance before finally explaining to Cha Shin-hyun that box work was like that. Now Cha Shin-hyun only needs to say the status. Windows immediately followed his sister's interruption. Then quickly 2 hologram screens appeared and showed the status. The yellow screen was the Murim status window. No one could see the yellow hologram screen apart from him, while on the other side were the status windows for Hunter. Cha Yun-seol got close behind her sister to see what status window she got when she saw her sister's status window was class. Immediately, his face was not that of a hunter. He also tried to comfort his older brother so that he would not drown in sadness for too long. Seeing Kak-sol's attitude, it was clear that the casino was surprised and asked what was wrong. Cha Yun-seol explained that hunters are divided into 6 classes: warriors, shielders, wizards, clerics, archers, and assassins. If Cha Shin-hyun enters a higher range, of course there will be more divisions, but those 6 are the basic hunter classes. An example is Yun-seol herself. Her basic hunter class is archer, but her high rank class is sniper. The average person starts with a base class, so they can neither reject nor change it. But Cha Shin-hyun's class is a class, which means it has no class at all, and the system detects Cha Shin-hyun as a normal human. Cha Yun-seol said that people who have flashless status can indeed become hunters, but their skills can only increase from a ski, unlike the general hunter class, who can level up just by getting points as a reference. The cheapest skills were hand-to-hand techniques, which were priced at 20 million won, and sword techniques at 25 million won. Hunters with automatic class gain skills just by leveling up, but hunter class have no choice but to continue to invest their money in skills. So Cha Yun-seol asked if her older sister had any money. A very scary, mocking expression from Cha Yun-seol made Cha Shin-hyun annoyed, but suddenly Cha Shin-hyun remembered that he had Lee as his financial support. Cha Yun-seol is annoyed that her older brother is not fooled so easily behind Cha Yun-seol's back. The older brother was relieved to have made the alliance, but now that wasn't the only problem that Cha Shin-hyun was thinking about. He was thinking about his status as a class. This youth wondered if they considered him that martial genius who would never appear again. In the world of Murim, being a hunter with no obvious talent sounds ridiculous to Cha Shin-hyun. Now they are on the mountain, in the territorial dungeon belonging to the Dawn Guild. In other words, it was a rabbit monster dungeon. In the dungeon, Cha Yun-seol was showing her sister how to hunt monsters, but Cha Shin-hyun said that her sister seemed to be working too hard just to take down one monster. Cha Yun-seol explained that a rookie hunter who thinks like his older brother must have messed things up because he thought his opponent was too easy. Cha Shin-hyeon said something like that would never happen to him. This young man picked up the red crystal that had appeared after the rabbit monster disappeared, knowing it was the Monstone that Yun-seol said could make them money. Cha Yun-seol confirmed that Monstone is a natural resource that does not cause pollution and stores an extraordinary amount of energy. That was why the nuclear power plant had been slowly disappearing ever since the appearance of the monsters. Cha Yun-seol asked her brother to be careful, even though her brother said he was the strongest martial artist because anything could happen in the dungeon. Just as Cha Yun-seol finished talking, his older brother immediately shot down 3 rabbit monsters at once with one finger. As soon as Cha Shin-hyeon said that if he used martial arts knowledge to defeat monsters, then he would not get a Hunter's Express. So he called up his status windows to view information about himself again. Cha Shin-hyun started to think about asking Lee to give him a different skill. But suddenly Cha Yun-seol said loudly, saying that his older brother was shameless, because wanting skills for free without doing dungeon tutorials really didn't care about his sister. He kept reading skill status and mastery. His skills are all minus. She warned her brother that no matter what contract she made with Lee Ji-hae, she was still not just any woman. Cha Yun-seol is worried that Lee Ji-hae will take everything from her brother. Cha Shin-hyeon was silent. His eyes turned very dark when Cha Yun-seol asked what was going on with his brother. Suddenly his hand was pulled by Cha Shin-hyeon to go to a better hunting ground. A few moments later, the two of them stood on top of a cliff, beneath which there were tens, maybe hundreds of rabbit monsters. Cha Yun-seol was very, very shocked to see that many monsters. He wondered how many monsters were in that place. Cha Shin-hyeon answered confidently that the number of monsters they saw at this time was 330,000. He could be sure since he had already inspected this location with his senses. Cha Yun-seol thought this amount was too much for a beginner like his brother. But Chestin-yeon instead asked him not to worry before he finally jumped while waving at Cha Yun-seol. As he fell down, Cha Shin-hyeon instead smiled a little while looking at his younger brother's face. He thought someone like him couldn't possibly get such a disgraceful status like a class, so he wouldn't spare someone who had given minus days of swordsmanship to someone who had reached the pinnacle of martial arts. Swordsmanship, Cha Shin-hyeon said as he landed. The jokes also have to have a limit. When this young man landed, the ground around him immediately cracked, as if what had just fallen was something that weighed hundreds of kilograms. Cha Yun-seol was still nagging at her sister, even though she was able to land safely, and told her sister to get rid of her anger. While thinking about how to cook the rabbits while the rabbits' faces turned red with anger, suddenly a system window popped up and asked him to slash along the lines. But obviously not going to listen to the notification, he instead slashed directly at the hologram screen, saying the system was so noisy. Instantly, hundreds of rabbit monsters in that place charged at Cha Shin-hyeon. Cha Shin-hyeon shrewdly swings a sword, slashing his opponent without hesitation. While fighting, this young man smiles and says, "Who are you teaching to that annoying system?" A moment later said, "Didn't they say the skill hunter appeared 14 years ago? You're 100 years quicker to teach me." That's what Cha Shin-hyeon arrogantly said, when he finally finished exterminating all the rabbit monsters until all that was left were monsters. Cha Shin-hyeon was annoyed again, because the hologram screen kept appearing congratulating him. After he managed to defeat the rabbit monster, he wondered why there were so many notifications like this. Apparently, the hologram told Cha Shin-hyeon that he had upgraded his swordsmanship skills to rank A+. Cha Shin-hyeon was quite happy to read the notice, but he kept pressing on the hologram screen because he wanted to resize it, which was too small. When Cha Yun-seol finally got off the cliff, she asked her sister what she was doing. He didn't know because his English skills weren't that great. He only knew his swordsmanship had increased now. Cha Yun-seol understood what was wrong with her sister's Windows screen. It was only natural that the hologram screen had to appear and give a notification because her brother had attained a plus-level skill in just a very short amount of time. When he saw something, Cha Shin-hyeon asked his sister if it was true that he could get XP when fighting monsters using passive skills that didn't spend MP. Cha Yun-seol confirmed this and asked why Cha Shin-hyeon instead answered nothing, while smiling mysteriously at the holographic screen in front of him. He realized his origin skills could be freely used, so he wanted to make things easier in the future. Cha Shin-hyeon took a swing by clenching his fists and punching the free air in front of him until dust flew, because of the force of the punch that was delivered. Now Cha Shin-hyeon knows that he can use his martial skills and can still earn XP. This young man now understands why the strongest hunters in Korea are Lee Ji-hae and Park Tae-hoon, because just like him, they have origin skills and also see their brother's martial abilities. She asked her older sister to teach her martial arts. At first, Cha Yun-seol did it when Cha Shin-hyun managed to beat Seo Kang-jin that easily. But today, seeing it for himself and realizing how strong his older brother is, the incident in the Red Wolf dungeon when his comrades were attacked made Cha Yun-seol not want to experience it again. But there is no guarantee that the incident will not happen again, but for Cha Yun-seol, who is a team leader if he is still at the same level. He won't be able to save his friends anymore, thus creating another regret of the day. Then Cha Yun-seol even cried when she said this. Cha Yun-seol realized that she could not be as strong as her brother, but if she studied martial arts, everything might be a little different. Cha Shin-hyun patted his sister on the shoulder saying, "He will teach Cha Yun-seol." So he asked his sister was to control her emotions and calm down. Cha Shin-hyun was honest with Cha Yun-seol that he had never had a student before, but he would still teach his sister firmly. According to Cha Shin-hyun's heart, this is a good idea because he can't always be by his sister's side, so the Kan soul has to be able to protect himself too, because no one knows what will happen in the future. Then Cha Shin-hyun turned around and excitedly said, they will go to the next place. They headed to the next hunting location while running. While on the road, Cha Yun-seol asked her sister what to do next, because her sister had mastered swordsmanship. Besides that, Cha Yun-seol was curious whether her brother would still continue to use his warrior skills. Suddenly 2 rabbit monsters appeared from above him. This young man immediately clenched his fists and prepared to attack while saying, he can increase his level even if he uses martial arts. Now he proved his words by defeating the 2 rabbit monsters with just one powerful punch. When Cha Yun-seol was still trying to look around more clearly, Cha Shin-hyun said he wasn't really sure, but there was one thing to be certain about his current situation. Cha Shin-hyun's future as a hunter is still unclear, so if Cha Yun-seol wants to increase his level as a hunter, he can do it later because now Cha Shin-hyun wants to master the special skill class first. In his mind, Cha Shin-hyun knew that Lee Ji-hye could raise her level even higher by combining her martial arts and assassin skills. So Cha Shin-hyun also had to find skills that could be combined with martial arts. Suddenly, this young man jumped into the middle of the crowd of rabbit monsters while exerting his inner strength. He had memorized a skill that had the manifestation of a martial art, but was useless when learned. There was one skill that was difficult to combine with martial arts, namely the wizard skill verbal, and that skill generally encompassed all magic. Cha Shin-hyun threw his blue fire version of the fireball. The younger brother, who was amazed at his brother's ability, wanted to ask what his older brother was doing, but his voice weakened when Chasing Yeon called him and said that he wanted to become a wizard. Instead of being happy, Cha Yun-seol was silent with a gloomy face. Inside her head, this woman grumbled because she had to explain several times to her older sister that she was a classless, which meant she couldn't become a wizard. Even though he can get a wizard skill, it won't be easy to learn. In the end, Cha Yun-seol can only stay silent and be annoyed at the behavior of her sister who doesn't want to listen to her. Now Cassian is staring at the 2 holographic screens in front of him, thinking after studying the Hunter system, he believes there is a big difference between the Hunter system window status and the Windows system status. Murim's status window only displays one condition. There is no special function other than seeing the level and condition of external and internal arts. Knowing the conditions will greatly help a martial arts user. But on the other hand, the Hunter's status window displays everything from stamina skills to MP. The layout is also easy to use. There are many functions, and there are enough details. The nature and approach of the 2 systems are very different, as if the 2 systems were created by 2 people with very different personalities. However, with the same capabilities, this system requires players to fight monsters to get XP. The rewards are also given quickly and reliably, so many people want to become hunters. But of course, there are still risks. I believe everyone can be strong if they can believe in themselves. On the other hand, the way to gain strength in Murim is slower and dangerous, by spending a lot of time training and putting one's life at risk. Only then can one get the power he wants. If you can't, you have to experience a fated meeting, maybe a fated meeting like the heavenly god, a legendary figure who became a god through divine ascent. A long time ago, and he created the book Heavenly Martial Origin Cultivated Barch, a hidden treasure that has always been fought over in Murim since ancient times. And it just so happened that Cha Shin-hyun found the treasure when he woke up in a mysterious cave. So as if it was a fated meeting because it was a bit strange, so he ignored it all along. the goddess who gave the delivery system to humans, so the person who sent Shinhyun to Murim might be the Sky War god, a mysterious figure who from the beginning appeared wrapped in a large chain of bars and was held back by an amulet. Mysterious amulet with the support of Li Ji-hai. It's been a month that Shinhyun is always trying to increase his level. He fights monsters of all sizes and shapes in order to increase his hunter status. Now Shinhyun is standing in front of a giant chicken monster saying he knows why he came back to Earth. More precisely to Korea. Now Shinhyun's hunter level has reached level 22. While Cha Yun-seol studied the 365 vein technique in the human body, Shinhyun also learned how to connect his internal arts. To be honest, Shinhyun is already too late to learn martial arts, but there are other ways. Cha Yun-seol got tense when suddenly her sister rubbed her back and said to vomit anything, even if what came out was blood. So that afternoon, Shinhyun forced the dirty key in his sister's body to be removed, so that Cha Yun-seol's inner strength could come out. When the key within him is forced to connect and his dirty key is removed. Now Cha Yun-seol can even split large rocks with just one arrow. Shinhyun decides that his little sister has gone up a level since the dirty key in his body was forced out. Now Shinhyun is sitting drinking tea again with Li Ji-hai. This girl compliments Shinhyun's good performance over the past few weeks. Now Li Ji-hai wants to start a conversation with Shinhyun, a black hair player in front of her, saying to get straight to the point. However, Li Ji-hai said she doesn't like getting unfair treatment, saying it's been a long time since the girl called her to that special garden, it seems. Li Ji-hai has a plan that has been successfully carried out. Li confirmed this and smiled kindly. He asked Shinhyun to date him. With a straight face, this young man said that this was his first time being asked out by a woman, but he was not really interested. Luckily, Li Ji-hai was not offended and asked Shinhyun to just come along. This girl continued that there was a new dungeon that was formed in the Buncheon area. The danger level was at level 10, and the estimated dungeon entry level was in the range of 45, 50, meaning that with that high level they had to form a party. With a hunter who has a fairly high range, Li also added that it was not a place that a level 10 hunter could go to. But this girl believes the story will be different if that person is Shinhyun. He asked once again whether it was true that Li Ji-hai wanted the two of them to enter the dungeon alone, and for what Li Ji-hai answered, that her goal was to control the number of dungeons with a high level of danger, but she also wanted Shinhyun to increase his level as quickly as possible as a hunter. He taunts when he says, "Does that mean Li will carry him when there?" Li was a bit surprised to see that in front of him knew the words to such a phrase, and he also acted like the aged master of Murim. Shinhyun was surprised to hear the girl's words. He said that he had known such a phrase for a long time, and Shinhyun asked with annoyance who he called old man. At this point, Shinhyun understood why Li was so supportive of him forming an alliance, but still asked the girl in front of him what Li Ji-hai was planning to level up as fast as possible. Li Ji-hai asked whether Shinhyun had ever heard of the Sun Festival. It is a festival that is held every year by the Dawn Guild and Twilight Guild. It's kind of a friendly battle to determine which guild is the best in South Korea. To outsiders, this was seen as their way of maintaining good relations, but actually this was an opportunity for the two guilds to observe the enemy's strength and determine when they could destroy each other. You could say this is a war with all the little conflicts between the Dawn Guild and the Twilight Guild. This is to determine who is the owner of the existing dungeon, and of course the growth of land is unavoidable. This matter wasn't exactly known to the public as well as what happened in the dungeons, but where were they? One wouldn't be surprised anymore if a large-scale war was about to break out because the two organizations were like gunpowder ready to explode at any moment. He asked how the conflict between the Dawn Guild and the Twilight Guild could happen. Answering this all started from the previous Han party. Their situation wasn't like this, but suddenly he starts to thirst for power and go crazy. He said that they kept following the Sky War god or something. Before Li Ji-hai had finished speaking, suddenly Shinhyun stood up and asked in a high tone if the Sky War god was here, and what was his relationship with Park Tae-hoon. Li asked the young man in front of him to calm down first, because he didn't know much about the Sky War god either. Li had only heard that one day Park Tae-hoon received a message from Murim through his status windows. Hearing that, he immediately sat back down with a serious, pondering face. Li continues that he can't tell if it's true or not because they can't see other people's status windows from Murim. Even though Mr. Tae-hoon received a special order from the Sky War god, he couldn't understand why the young man treated the Dawn Guild and himself like this, when before their relationship was very good. In the past, when they were students, even friends who understood each other. Lee looked down sadly with a sad face when he recalled their memories in Murim. Then a second later, Lee begged Cha Shin-hyun to come here. Came the festival as an alliance from the Dawn Guild. While walking to the car, Lee again explained that currently the Twilight Guild has greater power and influence because they are very aggressive in taking over dungeons, and always justify when power is unequal. This was seen at the festival, so the Dawn Guild could have ended. That was Lee Ji-hai's opinion, when the two of them were already sitting in the passenger seat of the car in the back of the girl, adding that at this time they had lost a director, Seo Kang-jin, as their only major strength at a critical time like this. Cha Shin-hyun's conscience pricked at the harsh insinuation because he was the cause of death of director Seo Gang-ji. He already understood the situation that Lee Ji-hae had to face at the moment, but he still didn't know what was Lee Ji-hae's reason for wanting to level up immediately. Cha Shin-hyun as a hunter. Then Lee Ji-hae answered that during the festival, there would be many media who were invited to cover and broadcast the festival. So Lee Ji-hae pointed at Cha Shin-hyun's face, saying, "Don't let this young man show his martial arts to the whole world because no one will believe it, because there is also no solid proof that he is from Murim, besides that it will make hunters around the world angry to see Cha Shin-hyun's behavior. This girl really believes Cha Shin-hyun underestimates the National Hunter Association and thinks defeating them is easy." Cha Shin-hyun did not deny this allegation. Lee Ji-hae made it clear that Cha Shin-hyun had to come to the Sun Festival with his hunter skills having increased. Finally, Cha Shin-hyun answered okay, even with a sullen face in his heart. He knew he couldn't refuse Lee Ji-hae's request, because he felt he owed him enough, because he felt Cha Shin-hyun had accepted his invitation. Lee Ji-hae took out a briefcase containing the 6 wizard skills requested by Cha Shin-hyun, and there was 1 skill each high-class mage and sorcerer. Finally, Cha Shin-hyun accepted and gave up, remembering that after all, she had to fight Park Tae-hoon later. Suddenly, a very thick pile of papers fell and urged Cha Shin-hyun Lee to explain that the place was not like Murim. Here there is a so-called legal step for this document to officially prove Cha Shin-hyun's relationship as an alliance of the Dawn Guild. They were all confirmation documents for everything Dawn had provided until now. Then there are contracts for payment guarantees, and even official hunter registration documents and formation documents. He was surprised and asked why he had to form a guild once again. He explained that there were complicated rules for hunter freelancers who wanted to take part in the Sun Festival. He brought that day the price would be more expensive than 1 housing unit. So if Cha Shin-hyun already understood, Lee asked the young man to immediately sign. Finally, Cha Shin-hyun did his signature with his face scrunched up in annoyance. He wondered why it could end like this. When he arrived at the column to fill in the guild name, Cha Shin-hyun was silent and looked confused. Lee informed him that it was only for formality, so he could fill it in as he pleased. So Cha Shin-hyun filled it in with the name of the Limitless Guild. Now the two of them had entered the dungeon with quite high difficulty. Just got in, Cha Shin-hyun was already complaining because lately all he's been doing is going back and forth from the house to the dungeon. Currently the two of them were flying, and above them dozens of monsters with dinosaur bodies but had wings to fly. Lee asked to be careful because even 1 monster isn't that strong, but they got information that the current number of monsters is very large. Cha Shin-hyun senses with his senses that the number of monsters they are facing is at least 3,000. But for Cha Shin-hyun, the more lazy the better. This young man pulls out a sword flowing with very strong Kai energy with 1 slash from that sword, then dozens of monsters immediately fell on fire. Lee was surprised to see the ability of the young man by his side. Because it had only been a few hours since he had gotten the skill, he explained that Mana's function was very similar, but for Lee Ji-hae it was not the case. If Cha Shin-hyun pushed himself too hard, he would run out of MP but full of energy. Confidently said that it would not happen because he is the limitless wizard, Cha Shin-hyun. Lee denied that statement by saying that Cha Shin-hyun was a class person. Cha Shin-hyun immediately collects Monstones with his powers, and then he asks if there is only 1 type of monster in that world. Lee Ji-hae confirmed this, but Cha Shin-hyun even felt something strange. Lee explained in more detail that ever since dungeons appeared 14 years ago, millions of dungeons have also been formed all over the world, but there has never been a case where there were 2 types of monsters in 1 dungeon, which was just as strange as after Lee finished speaking, there was a monster bird that was hit by a bigger monster. This monster resembles a large dragon with super large arms and legs. What kind of monster is this, and why is this monster bigger than the other monsters? Somewhere in the Seoul villa belonging to the leader of the Twilight Guild, Park Tae-hoon, a subordinate of the leader of the Twilight Guild, comes to see Park Tae-hoon. He said they received news that Vice Chairman Dawn was acting suspiciously. Lee Ji-hae has always been very supportive of rookies who haven't registered with the association yet. Besides that, it was also said that he went with her to do a dungeon raid. According to the results of the rookie's investigation, that was the team leader's older brother, Cha Yoon-sol, who is a member of the Dawn Guild. His name is Cha Shin-hyun. There is another thing that is strange about him. He just appeared after disappearing for 14 years. The strange thing is that not long after he appeared, the director of the Dawn Guild, Seo Kang-jin, was reported missing. Park Tae-hoon then asked where Cha Shin-hyun had gone for the past 14 years. Kim Chul-ho said that the investigation team did not know where he had been during his disappearance. Seo Kang-jin, who found him, suddenly disappeared and did not retire. It seems he went to Cha Shin-hyun's house to avenge his son's death. He said that if Seo Kang-jin died, Cha Shin-hyun might kill him. In a different place, Cha Shin-hyun was there. He felt different compared to using his skills. Then Cha Shin-hyun said that he really enjoyed it after getting a new skill. But they had been there for an hour. Did he not feel that his MP was starting to run low? Then Cha Shin-hyun explained that among the wizard skills that you gave him, there is such a thing as a life force, which is a type of emergency skill where Lee Ji-hae can exchange her life force to use magic power. Then Cha Shin-hyun explained again about the many things that made the girl confused to hear it. He didn't know how to respond, because he was dizzy hearing Cha Shin-hyun's explanation. Seeing this, Cha Shin-hyun then apologized because he explained too much in short that it was infinite origin flow. Even though the types of martial arts are different when Lee Ji-hae reaches an altimeter and the two will become one. The point is that anything is possible if he masters this high-level martial art. After saying that, Cha Shin-hyun walked away from there because he wanted to fight a few more tales before the battle with the boss. Lee then thought that Cha Shin-hyun was not communicating but just speaking what was in his mind in the sentence spoken by the girl to the point of worrying, even though his boss was just a monster. Then the Sun Emperor didn't have to worry about anything should Lee Ji-hae also do something, after thinking that a horde of dragons approached. Lee walked away until he fell into a ravine to be able to hold onto the slope with his knife stuck in the rocks, then looked down and it was really high. Even so, immediately jumped by attacking and beating several dragons, until he landed on the ground again, thinking upon his return, he should increase the danger of the dungeon. Their numbers were far more numerous than reported. Besides that, the dragons are very difficult to fight because they can fly. And then Lee Ji-hae asked what is a good raid composition for dungeons. That's because with a team of 5 defender mage shooter priests, and the other being a close combat type. Then without Lee noticing a bunch of dragons that were much bigger flying above his head, made Lee Ji-hae surprised by that, because he himself didn't know about it, let alone their size. So big that it made Lee Ji-hae wonder, why are there 2 kinds of monsters in that dungeon? Those dragons trying to attack that girl. He tried to avoid it. He found the dragons very annoying. Lee Ji-hae continued to dodge the many giant dragons. Moreover, they used demonic power. It felt very strange, and Lee Ji-hae was sure that the dungeon system had been broken. After seeing Lee Ji-hae, who was in a hurry, Cha Shin-hyun came and helped the girl, who had been waiting for the dragons for a long time. Lee, who heard this immediately, asked if he had been waiting for the dragons all this time. Then Cha Shin-hyun said that from the start, he meant that they were the bosses. When Cha Shin-hyun inspected the dungeon with his senses, he felt an unusual monster, and Lee asked what it meant. Cha Shin-hyun let them in, though, that they were there. Cha Shin-hyun had been waiting for him from the start. It was also normal that the boss was fought last. Cha Shin-hyun then said that Lee Ji-hae was so shocked that she couldn't move. But he is actually much stronger. He put the girl down. Then he said it was time to eat. Then they decided to eat. Lee asked what kind of food Cha Shin-hyun wanted, but Lee had said that Cha Shin-hyun shouldn't have said that. After that, Cha Shin-hyun said that he had been waiting for that time, and said that the food menu this time was chicken. He said that while going to defeat the dragons fell because of the energy fire from Cha Shin-hyun's power. Lee Ji-hae, who saw this, was confused by herself seeing Cha Shin-hyun's extraordinary power. Then with her telepathy, she spoke to Cha Shin-hyun and asked if Cha Shin-hyun used magic. Didn't he currently use his bare hands? Cha Shin-hyun said what was used at this time was magic. The girl realized, of course, that much power she must have used magic. But then Lee Ji-hye was even more surprised because she saw a group of dragons coming out of a place, and then the girl shouted to tell Cha Shin-hyun that the monsters were coming out of the gate. After that, he ran to Cha Shin-hyun's place and intended to help him. Lee was very worried about Cha Shin-hyun because Lee Ji-hye kept quiet trying to find a way for Cha Shin-hyun to escape. Then Lee Ji-hye said that the monsters didn't care if the other little monsters died. In such a situation, Lee already knew for sure the little monsters didn't move of their own accord. It was the big monsters who led the other small monsters. The proof was that the little monsters withstood attacks that aimed directly at the big monsters with their own bodies and were willing to sacrifice themselves. The fight won't end if you don't get rid of the bigger monsters first, but Lee is unsure how to approach them. And then whether Cha Shin-hyun is all right. Lee remembers that when their eyes met, Cha Shin-hyun seemed to be deliberately not avoiding them. He didn't even know what Cha Shin-hyun was thinking. It was the first time such a strange situation had happened, no matter how strong it was. But it was dangerous work, and Lee had to help her. But since she was floating in the air, there was no way for her to get close. Lee Ji-hye thought that it seemed like the monsters were too focused on Cha Shin-hyun, that they didn't notice that he was on top of her back right now. Then it seemed like approaching them was not a problem, and she hoped that this time Cha Shin-hyun could survive. Lee will take care of the mutated monster that emits a strange aura without Lee knowing it. Suddenly another dragon notices its existence and tries to make it fall. Lee almost fell, but luckily he survived afterwards. He fights the dragon, but he realizes there are many other dragons and asks if he will eventually take care of all the dragons, then uses his power, which is the Blade of Strength, which instantly destroys several monsters. It made Lee again, only to be surprised to see him. Lee also thought it seemed like Cha Shin-hyun was using an airbus to control multiple swords at once. Cha Shin-hyun said that the Hunter war game would end there. Then with many swords at once, Cha Shin-hyun attacked the monsters very quickly, and the monsters were defeated. Lee was happy with Cha Shin-hyun's help. They managed to solve everything easily, but it was a big problem. Then he asked what if something like that also happened in other dungeons, because currently the system determines the level of hunters who are eligible to clear dungeons based on the level of danger. But is it enough to deal with the emergence of mutation monsters and gates? Without a doubt, the entire party would be annihilated since the Sun Festival wasn't all that important right now. They had to conduct a thorough investigation, but there was no way Park Tae-hoon would miss the chance. When his attention is on others, if he doesn't pay attention, we might be determined by Twilight Guild. In an instant, Cha Shin-hyun asked why Lee Ji-hye's mind was flying everywhere. Cha Shin-hyun asked the girl about the stone she got, as it looked different from the others. Lee said that it was a monster skill stone because Cha Shin-hyun defeated a big monster. It seemed she had obtained a rare skill stone, and Lee Ji-hye had something to say. 1 month later, many people were discussing registration about the Hunter for the Sun Festival. They felt that they were really looking forward to it. But as if nothing stood out at the moment, they also discussed about Cha Shin-hyun, who was trending on the internet at that time. Even though it hasn't been a month since they registered. Meanwhile, Kim Chul-ho felt tired. At that time, in another Twilight Guild room, an impromptu meeting was being held by the executives. Inside the room, the members were making a fuss about it. Meanwhile, Park Tae-hoon remained relaxed. He says that they have to get rid of the seeds that will create a conflict while looking at the photo of none other than Cha Shin-hyun. Kim Chul-ho looked uneasy as he repeatedly kept looking at his watch. He was waiting for someone who soon came, and that person was Cha Shin-hyun. Cha Shin-hyun then shook hands with Kim Chul-ho. While he was so fond of Cha Shin-hyun, he said that it was an honor to meet Cha Shin-hyun there. But even so, Kim Chul-ho thinks that Cha Shin-hyun is just a little rascal who has no manners, even though it would be good to bring out his true nature. That person is like that, but his role is to gather as much information about that Cha Shin-hyun as possible. Then Kim Chul-ho said the real reason he invited to that place, but before that, he took out a magic tool known as a sound isolating device. If Cha Shin-hyun presses one of the buttons, there is a barrier that blocks outside sounds. A sound is formed. They won't sound either. It's the perfect tool for private conversation. Then Ho continues his words regarding his guild wanting to work with Cha Shin-hyun. Cha Shin-hyun asked whether Kim Chul-ho had not seen the list of hunters for the Sun Festival, where it was seen that Cha Shin-hyun had already collaborated with the Dawn Guild. Kim Chul-ho confirmed this, and his group knew that they also knew that Cha Shin-hyun had the full support of the Dawn Guild, as well as being informed of the secret circumstances of the matter regarding director Seo Kang-jin, and they had also seen the dungeon raid. Cha Shin-hyun, along with Vice Guild Master Lee Ji-hae, even with that, all Cha Shin-hyun had not joined the guild and instead set up one male and formed a cooperative relationship with them. Knowing this, they believe that there is a gap in Cha Shin-hyun's relationship with the Dawn Guild. Kim Chul-ho then asked Cha Shin-hyun to work with them. They can promise things that the Dawn Guild can't. Hearing this, Cha Shin-hyun thought that Kim Chul-ho was better than he thought. He had to retract his thoughts about Kim Chul-ho. Cha Shin-hyun praised Kim Chul-ho's knowledge, which turned out to be very impressive. Cha Shin-hyun found it difficult to deny with everything that Kim Chul-ho said. Then Kim Chul-ho would explain the terms and conditions, but Cha Shin-hyun didn't need that. Cha Shin-hyun said that she came because she was curious about what Kim Chul-ho wanted to say, but it turned out to be a waste of time, so she refused the offer before she even made an offer. Kim Chul-ho tried to prevent Cha Shin-hyun from leaving there and kept calling his name. Even he felt sad to leave for a while. Kim Chul-ho still saw him until someone mysterious saw him and asked how long Kim Chul-ho would stare at Cha Shin-hyun from a distance like that, and it turned out he was Park Tae-hoon. He approached Kim Chul-ho and grabbed his collar while saying, didn't he ask himself to buy time as long as possible? Otherwise it was useless. He eavesdropped on Kim Chul-ho, then tried to apologize to Park Tae-hoon. Park Tae-hoon didn't care about that, even though he was a little weird with Cha Shin-hyun. In a different place, Lee Ji-hae was talking to Cha Shin-hyun, who talked about what happened earlier regarding Cha Shin-hyun's meeting with Kim Chul-ho at Park Tae-hoon's request. He said that it seemed like Park Tae-hoon would have guessed that he was from Murim, but the name of the Supreme Sword Emperor had not spread far when he entered the cafe. Previously, he felt Park Tae-hoon increase his output. It seemed that Lee Ji-hae's prediction was correct. According to him, Park Tae-hoon is the type of person who will increase his alertness. If the situation is different from his prediction, he won't be a problem for a while. Then Cha Shin-hyun asked Lee about the dungeon investigation news, and said that thanks to Cha Shin-hyun, there were no more reports of strange phenomena in the dungeon. At least for now, Lee would definitely work alone until he died. If Cha Shin-hyun didn't investigate the dungeon himself, then she would be grateful for the help. Cha Shin-hyun asked if there was anything else he could do, and said there was nothing in particular. Lee Ji-hae then asked if something had happened to Cha Shin-hyun because he sounded a bit gloomy. A woman called Cha Shin-hyun and asked him to leave, which turned out to be his younger sister. They arrived at a building. They entered there, and the woman was sad while looking at her family photo frame, in which there were 4 people including herself, Cha Shin-hyun, and her parents. Cha Shin-hyun felt that it was a bad thing for him because he was too different from his old self. He could not shed a single tear, even though he stood in front of his parents' ashes, even if Cha Shin-hyun showed an inhuman side of him, because he thought it was not good for Yoon Seol to see. Cha Yoon-sol asked why he didn't look sad at all, or touched by that situation. Seeing that, Cha Shin-hyun was still silent. He apologized. Cha Shin-hyun then said if he became someone who could not show her, what does she want to see? Hearing that, Cha Yoon-seol got angry and shouted while asking if Cha Shin-hyun knew how weird he was. What is Cha Shin-hyun apologizing for? And what does he really think he wants to see, even though what Sol wants is his old brother, according to her brother, who is now very cold? Cha Yoon-seol doesn't even know whether Cha Shin-hyun is still her older brother or not. However, according to Cha Yoon-seol, a lot of time has passed, feeling that it is impossible for Cha Shin-hyun to be the same as he was before. Then Yoon Seol gets angry again that it doesn't matter because she can do anything on her own, whereas Cha Shin-hyun thinks that he shouldn't have come there, saying that he actually also wants to know what really happened to him. After that, his Murim status window opened, which made Cha Shin-hyun surprised by it, while he continued to wonder about the human form when he saw the writing. Cha Shin-hyun was confused because he didn't understand what was written on the window system. Cha Shin-hyun thinks it's bullshit. Then Cha Shin-hyun says that the system is always looking from one side, and then he asks who the system really is, whether he is Skywar the system. Then says that he will take everything from Cha Shin-hyun one more time, just wait. Cha Shin-hyun, who saw this, even challenged him. If he can do it, just do it, but for sure. Cha Shin-hyun will look for him until he finds him, and if he finds Cha Shin-hyun will tear him to pieces. Meanwhile, Cha Yoon-seol is annoyed when he realizes that Cha Shin-hyun is not following her at all. A few days later, the Sun Festival was held with great fanfare. The host shouted excitedly, saying that the day had come especially for the heroes who would explore dungeons and hunt monsters. They had all been waiting for a long time with great enthusiasm and high hopes for the hunters. Then the two guides cheered, saying that the biggest event in Korea, namely the Sunflower, had started. The audience had packed the stadium there to see the hunters later. Meanwhile, it's like some kind of Olympics or World Cup. Then Lee Ji-hai said that in fact, it was indeed similar in the public eye. It was the hunters who caught their attention the most. Hunters are like heroes who use magical powers like in movies, but that information is highly restricted internationally. The other goal of the Sun Festival was to create a friendlier image for the hunters. Then Lee asked if Cassian had a fight with Seoul, because when they arrived at the arena, both of them looked like they weren't well. Then Lee Ji-hai guessed that Cha Shin-hyun must have made a mistake again. Cha Shin-hyun then asked the girl to help him find a house in a quiet and remote area. At first he was confused about it, but then he realized that it seemed like Cha Shin-hyun had received a message from Murim's status window, saying that he didn't know what his goal was. But it seemed like the Sky War god was after him, because he didn't know what would happen against him then, if Cha Yun-seol by her side would be in danger. Lee said he understood because everything happened suddenly. Even if it was true, that's why Cha Shin-hyun was worried. On Cha Yun-seol's side, Lee Ji-hai continued to say that it seems that living separately from her younger sister is a strange thing to say. Cha Shin-hyun feels that Yun-seol doesn't need an older brother like him, because according to Yun-seol, the older brother she knew and hoped for had disappeared long ago, and wouldn't it be better to go back to how she was before? Hearing that, Lee Ji-hai immediately hit Cha Shin-hyun's chest, and said that if in fact he did not want to interfere in other people's family matters, but if his older brother said that, he would definitely hit him. And of course Cha Shin-hyun knew more about his younger sister than Lee Ji-hye. It was while they were talking that someone came to look for Lee Ji-hye because the festival was about to start. Lee understood that, and before leaving told Cha Shin-hyun not to go anywhere because he would talk to Cha Shin-hyun again. Cha Shin-hyun even thought what after that he will be punished. At the stadium, the MC was so excited said that before the event officially started, it would preview the opening ceremony. The opening will be carried out by the leader of the Dawn Guildmaster Jeon Jun-ho and the Deputy Guildmaster of Twilight Jang Sung-hyuk, while Lee Ji-hye and Park Tae-hoon are currently meeting. And Park Tae-hoon said that as a hunter who started his career as a co-worker together, he was really curious how they would feel facing each other at the peak. Lee was a little annoyed with Park Tae-hoon's words, but pretended to smile while confirming Park Tae-hoon's words and instead asked how he was. At that time, Cha Shin-hyun was there. Then Park Tae-hoon said that he heard that Lee was also busy taking care of rookies and was always interested in taking care of weak people, even though in his mind Park Tae-hoon said that this time he would get rid of Lee Ji-hai with his own hands. Hearing that, Lee Ji-hai smiled and took it as a compliment, even though in her mind she said, "Let Park Tae-young try." If only he could both shook hands, and after that, the Sun Festival began. All hunters fight each other and try to beat their opponents. Every hunter from both guilds was full of strength and vigor. They don't want to give up on each other. Seeing this, the vice chairman of the Twilight Master Guild praised him and said that one of the hunters had spent all this time fighting his enemy for a long time. Even though he was not a threat to his opponent Lee, who saw this thought that he was very arrogant after that Park Tae-hoon instead left from there. Lee Ji-hai only glanced at him without responding to anything when he came out that someone named Song Hyuk prevented him and called him. He asked when he could kill Lee Ji-hai. Park Tae-hoon asked him to be patient and relax first. He could have killed him when the time came. It would be better if he fought Yun-seol. The commentator then says that the preliminaries are about to start. There are a lot of contestants that stand out, but I'm personally attracted to hunter Cha Yun-seol. The girl is young, but Sai is a prospect who has shown very good results, but he heard that she had an unfortunate accident recently. They call it the Red Wolf incident, while in a room, Yun-seol along with two other people. One of the two says why the Vice Guild Master chose the one who slaughtered his underlings, or something bad will happen to them later. If they did something wrong, he who heard about it immediately said, why didn't they just say it to his face if they wanted to make it clearer? Seeing him get angry, the two of them walked away from there. Meanwhile, Yun-seol could only take a tired breath and remember that after that day, she had not spoken a word with her older brother. Knowing that he was lazy to get angry, even though he was the one who was sad, then why did Cha Shin-hyun act like that when he thought about it? Suddenly someone called him and said, "Can we go out for a while because someone is waiting for him?" He thought maybe it was Cha Shin-hyun after finding out it was Lee. Then feeling unenthusiastic, Yoon Seol then asked Lee what made him want to meet her. Lee Ji-hae said that Sai came there only to cheer up the prospect of their guild with Cha Shin-hyeon, but she disappeared somewhere. Lee didn't know what happened, but shouldn't they break up the misunderstanding between the two? Yoon Seol had asked since when Lee meddled in other people's affairs. Lee stammers a bit and says that he is only worried as Cha Shin-hyun's sponsor and Cha Yoon Seol's boss. Yoon Seol then flares up and says that while she actually didn't like Lee, it seems like she's just pushing him to her will now that she thought her older brother decided to become a hunter right after meeting him, while he hadn't even returned long since returning to his normal life here. Cha Yoon Seol wonders what reason made his older brother to become a hunter. What he was trying to do, become a hunter and being strong, is a strange thing. Even he taught something without saying anything to her, as if he was no longer the big brother she knew. And Yoon Seol feels that her sister is like a stranger. Then the loudspeaker says that Archer Survival will start soon. All contestants are prepared to enter the arena. Lee always said goodbye and left there before he said that Cha Shin-hyun no longer wanted to change everything. Lee felt the same suffering as Cha Shin-hyun. Lee said that if Cha Shin-hyun falls into hell where she can die anytime alone and spends a lot of time there, there's no way she can stay sane. He might not show that side to his little sister. Hearing that, Yoon Seol even felt strange why she had to hear something about her older brother from the deputy guildmaster. His elder brother must have thought that he was completely unreliable when compared to the vice guildmaster who was close to his older brother. Lee then saw Cha Shin-hyun and was sure that he was worried about his little sister, while Cha Shin-hyun just said that he happened to be passing by. Then Lee Ji-hae continued that Cha Shin-hyun was no different from Park Tae-hoon. Lee Ji-hae then grabbed her collar and said, "Why couldn't she just be honest, especially since her little sister wasn't a child anymore? Does he really think it's best to hide his intentions from his younger sister? Don't make him laugh if he has something he wants to say, then just say it without you hiding anything." Then he asked Cha Shin-hyun to show him something, the unknown side of his little sister. Meanwhile, the sign for the preliminary round of Archer Survival has already sounded. Soon 6 teams from the Dawn Guild and the Twilight Guild will fight there. Cha Yoon Seol, who was going to fight in another place, had Park Tae-hoon who was watching, and he said that he hoped that Lee Ji-hae liked what he had prepared. And besides that, it was still just the beginning. Archer Survival was formed like a city where the hunters were separated, including the guild of Yoon Seol. During the fight, Yoon Seol received many voices from her colleagues, who said that they had seen many enemies. Meanwhile, Yoon Seol was remembering when she talked to Lee Ji-hae that Cha Shin-hyun might not show that side to Yoon Seol. Remembering that, Yoon Seol gets angry and says if she didn't realize it just because she didn't say it, just tell her what happened, without sharing everything with Lee Ji-hae. Then she asks Cha Shin-hyun if Yoon Seol is still a child. Then after that, Yoon Seol started to get serious about fighting. And then she aimed at her opponent with the skill she had with her arrow, then quickly, she defeated his enemy. Yoon Seol really wants to prove to her brother that she isn't a child anymore. Cha Yoon Seol then remembered her past when suddenly both of her parents died. A lot of people were worried about her, and some of them said that if no one could take care of her, they couldn't even find her older brother's body. But she was sure that her older brother was not dead. She was sure her brother was still alive, but somewhere, he would soon be back in front of her. Cha Yoon Seol prayed, and believed in her prayers. Then at a sad moment when her parents died, Yoon Seol felt and saw something strange while she was watching TV. Until she thought that her TV was broken, something strange said that there was a divine revelation from a goddess, dungeon monsters and hunters. Was it because that ridiculous world came true? Yoon Seol believed that her older brother would return. In fact, she even really believed that. Later, she received the archer class after taking the hunter test and attended the hunter academy after being taken over by the state. But while at the academy, Yoon Seol was often bullied by the other students there. But she didn't stay silent because she fought all of them. Then that's how she graduated at the top of the academy. After that, Yoon Seol was recruited by the top guild that everyone coveted, namely Dawn Guild, because she just wanted to get stronger, for the sake of surviving the days without her older brother, for the sake of preventing thoughts of weaker from appearing even now she felt herself. But that was not a compliment for her older brother who was skilled in martial arts. He might seem weaker, but she couldn't forgive him for treating her like a child to the core. Cha Yoon Seol was sure that she wasn't that weak after she finished thinking about it. She instead wondered why this place was quite quiet and strange, Then she gave a code to her members that she would leave that place and settle down in a new place. But there was no response at all. Not long after, several arrows almost hit Yoonseol, and one of the arrows hit Yoonseol's left hand. She saw 4 enemies wielding arrows. Then she thought it's a good thing the arrow didn't hit her muscle, but unexpectedly her skin could be pierced with the arrow. The point of the arrow should be blunt, so that's absolutely impossible. And it turns out they used real arrows. One of the enemies says that Yoonseol doesn't need to hope that someone will come to her aid because they have interfered a bit, to ensure that the broadcast camera signal will not reach there. Hearing that, she just smiled and said that she didn't need anyone's help, and didn't rely on something like that in her life. She didn't know why they would do something like that, just to frame one person. She then pulled out the arrow stuck in her left arm and threw it away, after that drew the arrow to fight them all, and said that they should all die there. In the middle of this silent night, I am currently heading somewhere in this mansion. When I arrived at the room I was headed for, a man was sleeping on the bed. Looking at that man, I thought that this time I would succeed in saving the world. For the first one, I would start by taking off the blanket that was covering him, and then sitting on his stomach. The man woke up. He was quite confused and called me Elena. I feel happy because I finally succeeded. I thought I would fail like last time. Before, I didn't expect that he would wrap me in a blanket. Now I have knocked on the door of success. I thought there would be no more obstacles now, but suddenly he tore off the sheet and wrapped me again in the blanket like before. He then said it was late at night and touched me gently to lull me to sleep. I thought that I didn't need to be gently touched like that to fall asleep. When I thought that I should get rid of the sheets next time, he could guess my thoughts and say what I was thinking. He also said that it would be useless since he still had the curtains. I, who felt a little irritated, said that his absurd power was the reason why people called him a monster. He then called me his wife and said, if still, he wouldn't sleep in a room that had nothing, so he asked me not to try too hard. I, who still haven't given up, completely thought that he should just wait and see who would win in the end. While I was still wrapped in the blanket, my husband asked if I would sleep like this with him. I thought it would be a shame if I had to sleep with nothing to do, but I loved being in my husband's arms. I felt safe about it. I wonder if it's because he has a big body. His body is indeed muscular. I feel like I want to touch her just once. I asked him to loosen his grip a little, but he didn't want to. Slightly irritated, I asked my husband if I looked like someone shameless enough to do something to someone who was sleeping. He replied that I was like that, and that's why he refused to loosen up. He then asked me to sleep, and said that I must be very tired because it was so late. I thought too, if I lie here without moving, he might let me go after he falls asleep. Morning came, and I felt so embarrassed yesterday morning, seeing that the blanket was completely messy. I'm sure he let me go as soon as I fell asleep. I should have woken up in the middle of the night. Too bad. Really sad. At that moment I felt that he was distancing himself. Looking at the clothes she was wearing, I asked if she didn't feel uncomfortable sleeping in those clothes. I've heard that wearing everyday clothes while sleeping is not good for blood circulation. Therefore, if he wanted to maintain his health, he had to take off those clothes. When drowsiness began to attack, I thought that next time I would succeed. The drowsiness finally won, and I fell asleep. I am the 3rd child of Count Sort, a fortunate and beautiful noble. With fertile land under my family name and my father's business success, our family has wealth beyond measure. My first sister and second brother are currently fighting every day to become the successor of our family. So thanks to that, I just need to study and make some friends. I spend a lot of money to maintain my dignity. My second brother said that my life must be very easy. Hearing that, I also said if he was jealous, live like me. My life is very lucky. If there were people in the world who were burning with ambition, there must also be people who just watched and cheered them on. When I was leaving the house for the city, a beggar came up to me and asked me to give them 1 coin. My bodyguard was angry because the dirty bum seemed to touch my clothes. The beggar trembled and said he had not eaten anything since yesterday, and begged to give him just 1 coin. I stopped my bodyguard and told my servant to buy warm bread and soup. After my servant brought what I asked for, the beggar thanked me. We left him and my bodyguard said that I have a good heart. As the beggar watched me leave, he asked if I was that woman. While I was sleeping at night, someone called me madam and woke me up. I was thinking, who is she calling madam? My servant then asked me to regain consciousness as we must escape. I was surprised and confused why I was in the middle of the capital. When I looked up at the sky, I was surprised by the monsters that surrounded this city. I don't understand what's going on. My panicked maid said that we should leave immediately. He then said that I would be shocked, but I had to stay calm, even though my master and my 2 brothers had died. I couldn't understand what he was saying and asked if it was true that they had died. My maid was confused by what I said. He said that my father died from an illness more than 10 years ago, and my 2 brothers have also been dead for more than 5 years. They died in an accident. I became very confused. I'm pretty sure they were still with me until yesterday. When I looked again, my servant's face was not familiar. I at least remember my maid's face and think that she could be a spy. Then again, I'm not sure if there's a place like this in the capital. When I looked at the state of this city, I didn't see or feel any sign of life from anyone living here. It's like a ghost town. While we were running, a girl came out of the building and screamed for help. But suddenly the girl was attacked from behind. My maid and I were scared to see what happened. The girl begged to be saved while being eaten by a monster. I don't know what creature it is. My maid then grabbed my hand and told me to follow her. Out of curiosity, I asked what the creature was. My servant replied that the beast is called Elgis. He explained that the beast's eyesight is a laborer, so if we get as far away as possible soon, then we'll be fine. Looking at the monsters in the back just now, I don't understand why there are such creatures in the city. Suddenly my maid shouted. My maid had been stabbed in the stomach and told me not to make any noise because they reacted to sound. My servant then told me to go west because there is a tavern called the Forest of Sunrise. He asked me to seek help. Seeing me lying on the ground in shock, he shouted to leave immediately. I can't rest. Nobody knows what will happen to me. I didn't get lost thanks to the road signs, but my feet started to hurt because I didn't use sandals or shoes. When I saw the building in front of me, I was sure that it was the place the maid had told me about. I went to the building and knocked on the door of the tavern. I screamed and asked if anyone was inside and asked for help. From behind the door, a voice asked me who I was. I replied that I was Elena Sorte, the 3rd daughter of Count Sorte. The person inside recognized me and said that I was Miss Mellisto. I don't understand either. After entering the shop, the man asked his wife to bring me a glass of warm water. The woman also gave me a glass of warm water and a blanket. He then asked if I had calmed down. I also thanked the woman. The 2 of them then introduced themselves as husband and wife named Hans and Anna. They were quite surprised that I came alone. I also remembered my servant and was sure that he must have died. I also asked myself about my father and my 2 brothers. A worried Anna asked if I was okay. Out of curiosity, I asked what monsters were out there. Anna didn't understand what I meant at first, but she came to her senses and said that I was talking about magic beasts. My maid at that time also called her that. Because I didn't know the creature, Anna and Hans thought that I was hiding in a safe place. They were impressed that I hadn't seen a single magic beast in 1 year. Not understanding, I asked what he meant by 1 year. Anna then replied that it had been almost 1 year since the continent turned like this. I also remember my servant who said that my father had died 10 years ago because of his illness, and Hans who called me Miss Mellisto. I then asked Anna to bring me a mirror. After being brought a mirror by Anna, I was shocked when I saw my face in the mirror, and dropped the mirror. A worried Anna asked if I was okay. I was surprised to see my aging face. I then asked Anna what year it was. Anna replied that based on the royal calendar, this year was 887. I was shocked because already 20 years have passed. I thought I was dreaming, but my knee still hurts. I wonder if this is reality. When I was confused, suddenly heard a loud voice. Anna and I began to worry. Hans said that it might just be a magic beast, but he assured me not to worry, for the walls, doors, and windows were well barricaded. After Hans said that, a loud voice came again from the roof. Hans started to get dizzy and said that he felt like the magic beast had entered from the roof. Because there was no choice, Anna grabbed my hand and led me to hide in the basement. When I said that Anna had better get down quickly, she said that she was fine because I needed someone to cover the entrance. I'm still worried trying to convince him. But Anna said that they were husband and wife. Even though they weren't together when they were born, they want to be together in the end. After the basement was closed, soon Hans's voice was heard screaming for Anna. From above was constantly making noise. The frightened me could only sit in the corner and cover my ears while thinking about my mother. I miss my family. My mother has always been very affectionate to me. When he died, I cried for a whole week. And my father, I hated him because of his patriarchal nature and only focused on his business. However, for more than a decade, on her mother's birthday or anniversary, she always brought flowers and talked to her. I love my father's devotion more than anything. And as for my two brothers, they always fight. My sister is always there to listen to my complaints. And even though my brother's way of speaking was so arrogant towards me that it annoyed me, he often brought me so many dresses and shoes that I usually forgave him for that. While crying, I have to keep remembering those beautiful memories, because otherwise, I would be crazy right now. Night came and I woke up. I wonder since when I fell asleep. When I tried to walk, my feet hurt. My whole body shook, but I had to try to get up. After going upstairs, I saw the corpses of Hans and Anna holding hands. Even though a few moments ago they were still alive and gave me warm water and blankets, the image of them talking to me, I can still remember it clearly. I also felt unwell and vomited. While I was vomiting, I heard the sound of the door opening. Seeing that figure that entered, I started to laugh too. A magic beast that looked like a spider entered this room. In front of that magic beast, I couldn't help but laugh. The magic beast then charged at me and stabbed me in the stomach with its leg. Due to the pain, I woke up. I, who woke up from my sleep, could only tremble in fear in my bed. A moment later, my maid Mary came and asked if I was okay. Seeing Mary coming, I asked where I was now. He replied that this is my room. I also felt confused about what happened. I wonder if it was all just a dream. Seeing that I was still shaking, Mary said that I seemed to be having a bad dream. Hearing that made me think that it must have just been a bad dream. I then asked Mary to stay with me until I fell asleep. It's been a long time since Mary came to our mansion. Since childhood, I have been cared for by him. Mary's hand stroking my head felt so warm and soft. I hoped that what I experienced was just a bad dream. Morning came, and I woke up. I'm sure that what I experienced before was not a dream. I can't explain it, but I'm sure that what I see is the future. I then sat down on my bed and started to think. I don't understand how it could happen, even though yesterday was just an ordinary day like any other day. After finishing thinking, I called someone and asked him to find someone for me. There was only one thing that was unusual yesterday, and that was the old lady I gave bread and soup. After some time, my maid returned to report. I asked if he had found it, and he replied that he had. However, my maid said that the old lady said that she wouldn't move. As I ordered, he tried to bring her into the mansion, but she was quite stubborn. Because there was no other choice, I invited the maid to meet the old woman and asked her to accompany me. After riding the horse-drawn carriage, I arrived at a tent. When I entered the tent, I saw the old woman sitting holding a cane. The old woman said that I had finally come. When I arrived, the old woman greeted me. I feel there is something different about him. I feel a terrible presence. I then asked the old lady if she did it, and she replied that it was. I don't understand why he's bringing it up now. I was thinking that he might have waited until there were just the two of us. When I sat down, the old woman asked me to excuse this shabby place. I also said whether the place is luxurious or not, it is not more important than a matter of life and death. I then asked him why he showed me that future. That future was 1 year after the magic beast's attack. The kingdom has been destroyed and the civilians are brutally killed. Anna mentioned that this continent became like this, so the other empires must have collapsed as well. The world had ended at that point. I can't let that happen. I asked the old lady if the reason she showed me the dream was that I can change the future. He also replied that I could change the future. As I suspected, my guess turned out to be right. I then asked how I could change that future. The old lady asked if I knew Duke Kahan Meinhard. Hearing that name, I recognized him. Although I have never met him, I have heard of him. Even his nickname Devil Duke is more familiar than his name. Out of curiosity, I asked what was wrong with him. The old woman replied that her son would one day become a hero. I'm confused as to what he meant. The old woman then said that her son would awaken the hidden power of the holy sword, and then stab the demon king's heart with the sword. It was the only way to stop the destruction of the old woman's prophecy. If so, according to the prophecy, then the hero had not been born yet. I don't understand why it happened. The old woman then warned me that I must remember, for a hero to be born, a soul must be sacrificed. I asked her to wait and explain further, but the old lady said she had said everything she wanted to say and left with her magic. When I woke up, I was already outside the tent. My worried maid asked if I was okay. Noticing the whereabouts of my maid, I asked if walking out of the tent. The maid replied that I was right. I wonder what kind of magic she used, because I can't believe I don't remember walking out. I'm sure even if I go back in, the results won't change. So I asked my maid to come home. The old woman's explanation was too vague. That's why I searched the library for information, but I only found one book. The last time they were seen was several hundred years ago. Magic beasts live in the demon world. They are neither humans nor monsters. And the king of the magic beasts is the Demon King. The old woman said that the hero would stab the Demon King's heart. So he is the leader of the magic beasts. He must be killed to prevent the destruction of the world. This made me think, can't we just kill the Demon Lord right now? But there is no way to find the way to the demon world. And even if we find the Demon Lord, there is no way of knowing if someone other than the hero was capable of killing the Demon Lord. More importantly, even if I say all these things, the best scenario is not to be treated like a madman. Thinking about this solution just gives me a headache. I thought that the cursed Demon King should just stay locked inside his mansion forever. Having found no solution, I could only sigh. I then called someone who was around and asked him to call Albert here. When Albert arrived, he very politely asked if I called him. I then asked him if he knew about which noble family had plans of marrying Duke Meinhard. Albert also replied that he knew. Of course, he had a candidate because he was a duke, and he was rich. Albert then said that Duke Meinhard was negotiating with the Linden family. When I asked who the candidate was, Albert replied that the candidate was Miss Miel. I was surprised because he is my cousin. I rushed to visit Miel. Miel, who noticed my arrival cheerfully, asked what had brought me here all of a sudden. I also asked if she was planning to marry Duke Meinhard. Miel was surprised to hear that. Since I had heard about it, Miel asked me to enter. Miel started to grumble that her father had sold his daughter, even though it was such a good plan. Hearing that, I asked if she would have children after she got married. Miel also looked confused. I think my question was too sudden. When people get married, they usually have children and take care of the family. That's why I asked if she will have children or not. Miel asked if I was crazy and strongly objected that even if she died, she wouldn't want to. I don't understand why he wouldn't. Miel, who was confused looking at me, who didn't understand, asked if I didn't know who Duke Meinhard was. Of course I know. He's a duke, young, single, and filthy rich. Also, he has the curse of an ancient demon that makes everyone see him as a monster. The black mark that had been on Duke Meinhard's face had been there since he was born. No one knows the origin of the sign. The former Duke Meinhard and his wife had tried their best to figure out the mystery behind the mark, but as time passed, the mark still remained. People slowly started to feel contempt for him. Someone started spreading rumors that it was proof of a curse left behind by an ancient demon. Along with these rumors, a book appeared that had a demonic pattern resembling the mark on Duke Meinhard's face. Even though the pattern was technically different, it didn't matter to people. Then, a sad accident happened. Things just got worse. Miel asked why I was acting like this even though she already knew. He also asked if it was me. Would I want to give birth to his baby? I said, why can't I do it? After all, I was thinking, how could the son of a cursed man become a hero? It wouldn't be surprising if the one born was a demon lord. I asked Miel if she really believed such rumors. Hearing that, Miel asked if I really had gone mad. Miel knew that her face being hidden was not a rumor, but a fact. I just realized I didn't think about that. I also asked what if he turned off the light. After all, she would sleep with that man at night, but the disgusted Miel was afraid that Duke Meinhardt's black mark would rub off. Miel felt that she would rather die. I'm confused why the black mark will rub off on him. It's indeed some kind of contagious disease. Miel said she didn't know, but the bottom line was she didn't want to give birth to Duke Meinhardt's child. He had also decided to take Sir Amber as his companion. I was surprised because Sir Amber was her lover, but Miel that it was quite normal for married nobles to have lovers. After all, Miel had said that this wasn't a normal marriage. He was sure Duke Meinhard knew it too well. He also thought that he might already have a girlfriend. But if that was the case, then one of the lovers should have given birth to the child who would become a hero. So this is the reason why the world was destroyed. Miel, who was curious, asked if I was sick, because I suddenly came here behaving like a dissolute person and asked her to have the baby. In front of Miel, I asked how to get the marriage proposal. Miel replied that her father said something about making an important contract with Duke Meinhard. Then her father handed over Miel to gain Duke Meinhard's trust. Hearing that, I called out to Miel again. He was curious what else I want to say. I then said that even though we are cousins, we are no different from siblings. Our families are also quite close. Miel, who was listening to me, couldn't understand why I was suddenly bringing up that. I continued saying that if anything happened to my family, I'm sure my uncle would care enough for me to let me into the family as an adopted daughter. Miel answered of course that was true, but she didn't understand what was wrong with me right now. I also offered. Miel looked like she didn't understand what I meant. I offered myself in her stead to marry Duke Meinhard. I don't know if it bothered my uncle to force his daughter into marriage, but as soon as I told him my intention, Marquis Linden was delighted. Although she had hesitated a bit because she cared about her nephew, after repeatedly pleading with him, she finally sent a letter to Duke Meinhard. The letter asked whether Duke Meinhard would make Marquis Linden's niece Elena Sorte his bride. Fortunately, the reply letter from him came quickly. The contents of the letter said that he did not care. Miel and her father were also very happy. When I got home, my dad called me into his room and asked what I was doing. I told father that I had actually loved Duke Meinhard for a very long time. I want to be by his side and hug that man who is called Devil. With this, I'm sure father will definitely be tricked. My worried father asked me if I knew why everyone called him the Devil. Of course I do, even though I already knew that. So my father didn't understand why I wanted to marry him. I then said that I'm sure father doesn't think that his youngest daughter is stupid enough to believe in such baseless rumors. I tried to convince my father that this marriage would be very beneficial for the family. Besides, I made a pact with uncle that he would give half of the profit from the mine to father. With my pitiful face, I asked my father to bless me. Father finally agreed to bless me. I'm also happy because it has been approved and smiled sweetly. Seeing me smiling, my father smiled too. The wedding day finally arrived. Mary, who helped me get dressed, said she didn't expect me to get married so soon. I answered that events in life always come suddenly. For me, this is fine. After all, I do have to get married one day. All the young girls I know get married after finding suitable partners for them. They called their marriage sacrifice for family. Compared to them, this marriage couldn't even be called a sacrifice. If I could save the world through this marriage, of course it would be nothing. After my preparations were complete, my maid led me to the wedding hall. Before entering, I felt a little nervous. After convincing myself, I entered the wedding hall. Seeing the man who would be my groom, I was a little surprised. So he is Duke Keihan Meinhard. When I looked into her eyes, I thought I was looking at the ocean. His eyes were really blue. My father then took my hand and led me to the groom. Looking at him up close, his eyes really looked like the ocean. Seeing me staring at Duke Meinhard, Miel said no matter how fascinated I was, it would be impolite to stare like that. A little panicked, I said that's not what I meant. A moment later, Duke Meinhard stretched out his hand and led me. I asked if he heard us. I wonder what if he heard us. When the priest gave the vows speech, I thought that Duke Meinhard's hands were big. He is also very tall. Even his muscles and everything look strong. After the speech, the priest asked if I vowed to love and cherish the groom, Duke Meinhard, forever in the name of God. I replied that I swear in the name of God. The priest then asked Duke Meinhard if he swore to love and cherish his bride, Elena Sorte, in the name of God. He replied that he swore. It was only a formal answer, but I found it odd. After the wedding ceremony ended, in front of the carriage that was waiting for me, Miel cried on my shoulder and said that she really didn't know how much I loved her. Miel's father then thanked me. I replied that I married because I wanted to. I can't tell them the real reason. If I did that, it would definitely reach my husband's ears. This time, my older brother came and said that I was in big trouble now and asked what I was going to do. He said that I would no longer be able to buy clothes from my favorite shop in the capital and also dessert from my favorite bakery. I replied that I could do all that in my new house. Even though he sounded mocking like that, but he was really worried about me. He then asked me if I was happy. I asked again, what if I don't? He also replied that apparently not. But before he could finish his sentence, my older sister suddenly told him to step aside and said that he would always be by my side. He also said that if I have a problem, then come to him without hesitation. I feel happy to see my older sister who cares about me so much. My brother, who is a bit irritated, said that anyone could say something like that. My sister replied that if so, then she should do it too. Hence, he told elder brother to stop spouting nonsense, that wouldn't help. After that, they started fighting as usual. When my brother was fighting, my father came over and I called him father. Father, who heard me call him father, said that on days like this, I can call him Papa. But since it sounded horrible, I said I don't want to. My father was shocked to hear that. Seeing my father's expression, I laughed too. My two brothers did not expect to see me teasing my father. My older brother also told my older sister that my father was always weak towards me. My elder sister, who heard that, said that my elder brother should put his hand on his chest and ask, if it was him, would he be weak against a son like him or a daughter like Elena? My annoyed brother replied the same question to my older sister. My sister also replied that she would not be weak against her child. Witnessing the bickering of my two brothers, I was at a loss for words. I then went to my father and thanked him for raising me well. Dad was at a loss for words hearing that. I also asked him to take care of himself. He replied that he would do that. I ended up going on a horse carriage. I think in 20 years the world will be in trouble. But besides that, in 10 years, my father will die from illness, and my two brothers will get into an accident in 15 years. All died before the destruction occurred. By what illness or what date was the accident? I wish I knew exactly when it happened. I also wonder why my two brothers died in a train accident. I tried to look for the old lady again, but she disappeared without a trace. I thought that I should ask the old lady about the future in detail. In front of my husband, I sighed. Chapter 7. The maids led me to my room. I also asked if it would hurt. I'm sure it will be very painful. I heard it will hurt the first time. When I realized that there was wine in this room, I drank it without hesitation. I have to be sure that I will be fine even on the first night. Morning arrived. I feel like I've been abandoned, even though I was trying so hard to stay awake. I then called a maid. When the maid arrived, I asked her why she didn't wake me up. It was almost noon, so I asked why he didn't wake me up. But the maid answered that Duke Meinhard told her not to wake me up. The maid then explained because I had been sitting in the carriage for a long time. I must be exhausted. I'm confused too. He didn't even show up the first night. Isn't that an insult? But there's no reason for him to do that. We just met each other. Come to think of it, I just saw his mask the whole time without seeing his face. I feel that I should meet him. The next time we talk, I'll have to take off his mask and get a closer look at his face. I also asked the maid to take me to my husband, but the maid said that she was currently out, because last night there were monsters roaming this region. I'm confused because I was never told about it. The waiter also apologized. He wanted to convey it to me, but he forgot. That's why I asked if that meant that Duke Meinhard wasn't here last night. He also replied that it was true. I've come to think that's why he didn't show up. I almost misunderstood. Out of curiosity, I asked if this happened often. The maid replied that it happened occasionally. Duke Meinhard's estate had fertile and well-developed soil. Even though the business area was well-equipped, in the past monsters would occasionally appear from the mountains. I hear their life is quite difficult. Soon after, Duke Meinhard inherited this area. He then aimed for the time when the number of monsters would decrease due to the extreme cold. He himself climbed mountains, led knights, and swept away monsters with all his might. Since then, peace has returned to this region. He was only 16 at the time. The funny thing was, that dazzling appearance added to the reason why he was called the Devil Duke. After that, the territory developed rapidly. To celebrate the successful extermination of the monsters, he reduced the area's taxes for 5 years. After that, a rumor spread which had a very good effect. If I think about it, he's a very resourceful guy. Seeing me lost in thought, my maid asked if she should call him now. I replied that it wasn't necessary and asked him to take a walk around the castle. Besides that, I'd like to introduce myself to everyone. However, I feel relieved that I wasn't left behind. At this time, people gathered and said that they are honored to welcome me. A servant who looked quite old then introduced himself as the chief steward of this mansion, whose name was Ben. Then a female servant introduced herself as Lola. After that, a chef introduced himself as Cooker. I was also impressed with the name that fits his profession. Then, out of curiosity, I asked the last person who he was. He also introduced himself as gardener, and he was in charge of the garden in this mansion. I have heard of butler and cook, but I didn't expect that there is a head gardener in this mansion. Hearing me feel impressed, Lola said that their master really likes gardens. Gardener also said thanks to that, there are more than 10 gardeners working here. Ben then said that the garden in the east was the garden that their master often visited. After they introduced themselves, I introduced my name to them, and I only became the mistress of this mansion yesterday. When I was about to say my name, I felt a little embarrassed because I now have his last name. I also introduced myself as Elena Meinhard, and said that I hope we can get along well. Night falls, and I'm currently sitting on my bed. I thought that this mansion was much bigger than I thought. I spent all day looking around. Because of that, I feel tired. I also lay on the bed. Even so, it seemed Duke Meinhard had already returned. I asked if he would come if I waited for him. I also decided that I cannot sleep. First of all, I'll ask how the conquest is going. But morning finally came. I'm really confused why. I don't understand why I can't meet him even just briefly. At first I thought that he might be busy. But after 1 week of waiting, I started to get annoyed and thought that 1 week was too much. I sure lost Duke Meinhard avoided me. I can't allow this anymore. I wonder if something happened that I wasn't aware of. As I was walking while thinking, I noticed the presence of 2 maids. Looking at their eyes made me wonder why their eyes were sparkling like that. To be sure, I asked if their names were Henri and Marie. They also replied that it was true. I then said that I had not seen Duke Meinhard even a second in the past few days. Before I finished speaking, the 2 of them looked pleased and said that they already did. I don't understand what's going on. They then said that they were waiting for me to notice. They continued to say that they would make sure Duke Meinhard wouldn't look for me again, so I didn't need to worry. I was surprised to hear what they said. They also told Duke Meinhard that I wasn't feeling well and asked him not to see me until I recovered. It was the 2 of them who had thought about it, and Lula's maid didn't even know about this. Feeling that I had had enough, I told Marie to immediately summon Butler Ben and maid Lola. Then I told Henri to stay here. Henri and Marie did not understand what was going on. Annoyed, I told them to hurry up. Henri and C7, who finally realized, finally knelt down and said that they had done something wrong. They also admit they were wrong. They then said they were doing it for me and had no other intention. I didn't expect that I felt anxious and wasted a week of my time because of these 2 people. I suspect that there is a woman who likes him because he is the Devil Duke. If Miel were in this position, they would definitely be praised and rewarded. Ben and Lola finally arrived, and I asked Ben what punishment I could give them both. Henri Marie was starting to get scared hearing that. Ben said that according to the rules of this mansion, the harshest punishment I can give is to cut off their tongues. Henri and Marie, who were even more scared, begged for forgiveness and said that they admitted their mistake. I also asked if they really realized their mistake, but Marie was even more confused. Even I myself don't understand why I'm angry. How can the 2 of them understand? I also gave them 5 strokes and 2 days of fasting, then give them a week's probation. Lola also thanked and took them both while pinching their ears. Seeing Henri and Marie, who were taken away by Lola, Ben said that they had been working here for a very long time. But I don't think that's the case. I could have done as the butler said, but I just didn't like it being the first thing I did as the mistress of this mansion. After this matter was over, I asked Ben if Duke Meinhard was in his room right now. Ben then offered to lead me there. Kahan, who was currently working in his office, heard a knock on the door. He also asked who was there. But suddenly the door opened and he was surprised to see his wife who entered. I then walked over to my husband and stared at his devil mark. I thought that there was nothing terrible about that mark. My husband doesn't understand what is going on. I slowly reached for his mark. When my hand touched his face, my husband flinched a little. I also apologized for suddenly touching him and asked if I hurt him. He replied that he was just surprised. I asked if I could touch her and she nodded in agreement. When I touched her face, I thought that she really was soft like a baby's skin. I felt that her skin was even prettier than mine. After looking into those sea blue eyes, I realized that I didn't come here to do this. After clearing my throat, I said that to be honest, a moment ago I punished 2 maids. He replied that he had heard of it. I was a little surprised to hear that. I then asked if he heard the reason too, and he also said yes. I told him I wasn't feeling sick unlike what the 2 maids said and was fine. He replied that I look like that. I then told him that I haven't slept well the past few days because I was waiting for someone. I then said that I had no interest in sleeping alone. Therefore, if he already understood, I said that I would wait for him today. Having already said everything I wanted to say, I fled back to my room. On the way back to my room, I thought that I looked a little more embarrassed after arriving at such an unfamiliar place. At home, my older brother always nags at me, Anyway, that reminds me that it's time to write a letter to my family. After arriving at my room, I asked the maid to prepare water for bathing. The maid also asked what flower petals I would like to use. Hearing that made me curious as to what the flower petals were used for, and reminded me that my husband's skin is very delicate. I answered whatever it is, no problem. After confirming my order, the maid rushed to do her job. After the maid left to prepare the bath, I poured the water from the teapot into my cup. I wonder why I'm so thirsty. I feel like maybe I'm feeling nervous, even though the night is still long. After all, it makes sense, because this is not just normal co-sleeping, but this is the first step to save the world. I have to have children soon. Night finally came. While I was waiting on the bed, my husband finally came. Seeing me waiting, he asked if I was surprised. I said nothing and told him to come inside. Seeing him standing at the door made me think he was really tall, because he sat down this afternoon, so I didn't notice. I was starting to doubt if this was going to be okay, but I decided that this must be done. After all, there is no other choice. When Kahan got on the bed, I was fascinated by her body. I stopped my strange thoughts. After Kahan sat on the bed, he asked me if I was really going to sleep with him. I said yes because we are husband and wife. I don't understand why he's asking something so obvious. I then asked if not my husband, who else would I sleep with? Kahan finally understood and tried to turn off the light. I asked him if he was trying to turn off the light and he said yes. I was thinking that he might like it when it's completely dark, though I deliberately made it dim to set the mood. But I wonder why she didn't unbutton it. I also asked Kahan if he would not take off his shirt. I asked if she would not take off her clothes, but he replied that he was more comfortable like this. I was confused by what he said. I was thinking that maybe he meant it would be easier if we turned off the light first and then undressed. In that case, I wonder if it's fine if I just lie down like this. I'm sure it's like that in the novel. I waited and started to feel strange because it was so quiet. I was surprised to see Kahan, who was already asleep. Even though I was beside him, he was sleeping. I asked if he really didn't want to do anything. I'm not sure exactly what this is. Drowsiness began to attack, and I fell asleep. After waking up from my sleep, I stretched my aching body. I feel that I sleep well, and my body feels light. Also, I feel that it hasn't been long since Kahan left. The place where he had fallen asleep was still warm. Apparently he was diligent too. I don't understand why he just slept last night. As my maid was helping me get dressed, she asked if I would like to have breakfast in the dining room. I answered yes. I'm sure it's not like this in the novel. When I arrived at the dining room, I asked the waitress if Kahan didn't have breakfast. The maid replied that she usually had breakfast in her study. I sat down and started eating breakfast. At that time, I thought that it was understandable. My acquaintance, who is a new countess, had the opportunity to do first night after being married for 2 months. Her husband took care of his wife, who had just come to a strange place. But I don't have to wait anymore. I wonder if we can do our first night tonight. I feel that it would be great if we could do that. And of course, there is no other reason for all of this than to save the world. Night finally came again. Kahan, who was sitting on the bed with me, asked if I was tired. Hearing that question, I thought that this might be a sign to do something that married couples do. I shook my head and replied that I wasn't tired at all. I'm also happy that we can finally do it today. He then said that yesterday I slept very well. Therefore today he hopes tonight I sleep well too. Seeing him getting ready to sleep, I was confused. I don't understand what he means by sleeping well tonight. I also thought that it was not a sign. Even though I feel very loved, this doesn't mean the world will end tonight. So I slept with him too. And then, day after day, night passed again and again. But he really didn't do anything for 2 months. Beside Kahan, who was lying down, I asked if we won't do anything and just stay like this. Just to say this, I drank so much wine to have the courage to say it. Kahan, who heard my question, said that I didn't need to worry about that, because even if I am his wife, he will not touch me. I don't understand what he's saying. Actually, I don't really know anything about marriage relationships. In the novel also does not explain in detail. The madam in charge of my education also said that all I need to do is leave everything to her. Even so, his words were of no help. But I know one thing for sure. If a man and a woman want to spend the night together, they must undress. I also sat on Kahan's stomach and forced him to open his clothes. Kahan tried to refuse and asked me to wait. but I screamed and asked if he did it while wearing clothes. I kept forcing her to take off her clothes. Because Keihan kept refusing to take off her clothes, I grabbed her collar and asked her why she didn't want to take off her clothes. I screamed at him why he won't take off his shirt. Keihan, who felt there was no other choice, took a sheet and used it to wrap me up. I asked him what he was doing and asked him to let me go, but he refused. In the end, drowsiness attacked me until I fell asleep. When Elena fell asleep, Keihan stroked her so she fell asleep. Upon seeing her sleeping face, Keihan felt stunned. He then continued to stroke Elena until she fell asleep. When morning came, I felt that I wanted to die. I wonder if I'll die on the spot if I ram my face here. I finally gave up. There's no way anyone would die just because of a wash basin. I took a deep breath. Seeing me sighing, my maid asked if there was a problem. I think there is, but don't know how to put it. When I saw the reflection of my face in the water, I thought whether yesterday was the second time I was so drunk. When I was 15, when I was with my brother Edward, he said it was okay as long as I had guts. I thought that he handled it well again because he looked happy. But the next day, my brother got angry and told me not to drink anymore because of my rude attitude while drinking. I also replied to his words if it were not for his sake I would not drink. My older sister then supported me and said it's true. She should restrain herself as usual. He then asked her why she was so hard on it. Since then, I've been holding back. Until yesterday. Recalling yesterday's events made me dip my head in the water. My servant was surprised to see my behavior. I then asked my maid to return this water and bring new water that was as cold as possible. My maid was confused by my request. After changing my clothes, my maid who was doing my hair asked how my breakfast was. After thinking about it, I asked to take it to the library. Then I also asked if I wanted to have lunch and dinner there too. The maid said she would arrange it. Because I finished styling my hair, the maid said goodbye because she wanted to prepare my breakfast. But before he left, I asked him to wait a moment. The waitress asked if there was anything else I would like to ask. I asked him if I wasn't pretty. The waiter was confused. I said that it was fine and asked him to answer freely. I'm asking just out of curiosity. I remember Keihan who said that, even if I am his wife, he will not touch me even a finger. I don't understand how that could be. Even though we are husband and wife, I wonder if I'm not charming. Remembering that makes me feel uneasy. But the maid said that my face is beautiful and my personality is beautiful. I asked him if he really meant it. The maid replied that she really meant it. He then complimented that my eyes were clear and fresh like newly blooming buds. He also complimented my silver hair, which is white and dazzling, as if woven from the clouds. He then complimented my beautiful and harmonious nature, my big eyes and soft shape, my sharp nose and perfect and balanced size, and my lips which were quite thick and already red even without makeup. Hearing that made me remember that my brother often complimented my silver hair. The self-absorbed maid continued to compliment my flawlessly soft and white skin, radiant peach-colored cheeks, small and slender features, and forehead that was neither too wide nor too small. I didn't expect that he still wasn't finished. He also said that I was tall, but slim and had a nice waist. My wrists, ankles, and shoulders are also well built. My collarbones are straight, my legs are long and soft, and my gait is light and elegant. Hearing the maid's praise, I thought it was so. When I saw my face in the mirror, I thought that he might be right. The maid then said that if she dared to say it with her scornful mouth, that no man in this world would feel that I was not beautiful when they looked at me, including Duke Meinhard. Hearing that makes me feel happy. I also thank him. I think if I am not mistaken, her name is Abby. I'm sure that his future will be bright. Abby replied that it was nothing and she was only saying what she saw. I was sure that there was no problem with me. I'm a little embarrassed to hear that, though. I finally changed my mind and asked Abby to convey to Duke Meinhard, if he's not busy, I'd like to have lunch with him. After thinking it over, I changed my request and said even if Duke Meinhard has work, tell him that we will have lunch together. I became very excited because I had made up my mind. If I'm not the problem, then I have to hear the reason right now. Lunch finally arrived, and when I entered the dining room, I saw Keihan already sitting at the dining table. I sat on the chair across from Keihan, even though I've come, but he's still just silent. After serving my food, my waiter said, "Hope I enjoyed my lunch." I originally planned to sit close to him, but once I got here I couldn't even look him in the eye. I've come to think that I'm trying too much. While I was thinking, Keihan asked how I was doing. I'm sure he must be talking about my aftermath. I replied that I was fine and thanked him for worrying about me. Hearing my answer, Keihan also felt grateful. Seeing Keihan's face, somehow he became very handsome. This makes my memories of yesterday play automatically. Of course, by then I was drunk and wrapped in the blanket. But I remember something. His sleeping face and his strong hands caressing my body, and also the strength of his hands when hugging me. Exactly what I see right now. Just thinking about it makes me so embarrassed. I'm curious why I suddenly feel hot. Keihan suddenly said to Ben that no one is allowed to come in here unless called upon. Ben and the other maids also left this room to make me confused. Keihan then asked if yesterday my attitude was sincere and not just because I was drunk. Hearing that made my face flush. I also thought that the time had come and said yes. I said that I was brave because I drank alcohol, but that didn't mean my attitude wasn't sincere. Of course, I apologized for my attitude. Keihan said that it was okay. Besides, I said that it's been 3 weeks since our wedding, but we still haven't done our first night, and asked how long should I wait. I also said that this is not something I can be proud of, but I'm not a patient person. I asked if that was too rude, and wondered how he would answer. Hearing my worries, Keihan asked if I needed an heir. He knew that I had 2 brothers, and asked if there was some kind of problem with them both. I replied that that was not the case. Keihan was confused. Then he asked if maybe he misunderstood the marriage contract. I replied that I already knew that there were no details about making an heir in the agreement. This marriage was definitely not a normal marriage. This is a collateral agreement between my uncle and my husband. But still, it shouldn't be this cold. Who doesn't know that it's a contract marriage? Thinking about this makes me a little upset and sad. Keihan, who was still confused, said, "Then why would I want to sleep with him?" I replied because we are husband and wife, and asked if I needed any special reasons. Of course, there is actually another special reason, because Keihan's son will become a hero and defeat the Demon King. But I can't say that because I have no proof. The old lady had said something about sacrificing the child. When I woke up, I was already outside. Keihan was surprised. He then apologized because he couldn't give me what I wanted. I didn't get it. I asked if that meant he couldn't sleep with me. Keihan replied that it was true. I really don't understand why it can't. I'm sure it's not because of her body that she can't have children. In that case, there was no way the old lady would say that. I asked him to tell me the reason. I asked what it was because he didn't like me. He replied that was not the case. In that case, I asked if I really didn't interest him. Keihan panicked and said that was not the reason. He apologized, but because he was afraid that I would misunderstand what he was saying, he made sure that it wasn't about me. Keihan wasn't sure if this was a good enough answer, but other than that, if there was something I wanted, then she would give me anything. Hearing that disappointed me, because all I want is one, and that was the child of Duke Meinhard, the child who would save the world. I finally thought of forgetting about it. There's no point in pressing any further. If it's like this, there's nothing else I can do about it. Therefore, at this time it is better to retreat. If he doesn't want to sleep with me, then he can do as he pleases. Because I also have my own way. I also decided to attack him. While looking through the books in the library, I thought that I could ask later why she didn't want to do that. I currently have the responsibility to change the tragic future. I'm not sure if I can do it, but I should be able to do it. I'm sure that I can take advantage of the moment when his mind is unclear when he's drunk. Anyway, I've decided that I'm going to attack my husband. But if the previous incident happened again, then it would be unacceptable, because he would definitely fall asleep. Currently, I lack both knowledge and ability. That's why I look at the books here, because books are a source of knowledge. When I looked around, I also found a book entitled The World of Husband and Wife. When I saw the contents of the book, I was sure this was what I was looking for. I am so very happy that I found it. Holding the book tightly, I looked around and hoped that no one was here. The next day, when my maid came into my room, she was very surprised to see me as exhausted as a corpse, and asked if I was okay. As I thought, one sleepless night was too much for me. I weakly replied that I was okay. I've read 5 books in total. It really is like discovering a new world. The maid picked me up and asked if I wanted to take a shower. After lying on the bed, I replied that taking a shower might relieve my tiredness. The maid understood. I think that I'm really tired right now. After helping me shower, my maid said if there's anything else I want, then just tell her. I'm really feeling very sleepy right now. My head was shaking with sleep. Falling asleep, I banged my head on the table. I rubbed my sore forehead. One of my maids who heard the loud noise came into my room and asked if I was okay. I replied that I was fine and asked to let me alone for a moment. The maid understood and left my room. The impact was very painful. I was afraid that my forehead would swell. I'm sure this is all his fault. If only that man didn't talk like that in the dining room. If we get married, shouldn't we be doing husband and wife duties? Suddenly I realized something. I stood up and rushed to Kahan's place. In front of Kahan, I asked if he had a minute.
Kahan, who saw Elena's blushing forehead, made her curious. Seeing Kahan staring at me, I asked if something was wrong, and he said nothing. I again asked if he had free time. He said yes and asked if I needed anything. His confused face is all I need. I didn't come here to get angry. It's just, I want to see her face have a different expression. I asked him if he remembered what he said at the restaurant, about him saying that he would do whatever I wanted. He replied that he remembered as long as it was not sleeping together. Hearing that pissed me off. Then, I first asked him not to hold me responsible for coming here so suddenly. Second, I asked not to kick me out. And third, I want us to be alone. After seeing my face, Kahan told the maids not to come in until called. The two maids finally left. After the maids left, I smiled at Kahan. Now it's just the two of us left. Then I sat down at the table opposite Kahan. Seeing me sitting in front of him, Kahan called out to me. I also asked what was wrong. I'm sure he's very confused right now. My brother Edward used to be like that too. Edward, who was angry at that time, said that I was the one who was wrong here. I then said that my feet hurt and sat across from him. Edward, who didn't understand, asked what I was doing and told me to get off. I also said if he is not happy, then I think he is wrong. Edward finally relented and apologized. The results at that time were very good. I'm sure my husband will be confused too. But right now he didn't react at all. I don't understand why he doesn't react.
Kahan, who saw my lumpy forehead, was about to say something, but didn't. I was the one who misunderstood that he didn't have to worry about his desk since I'm pretty light. He also said that he knew. I asked what he said earlier, he said nothing. I'm sure he said he knew. I asked how he knew. Maybe I look skinny. I think that I should go now. Anyway, he wasn't as flustered as I thought he was. I finally decided what I want. I asked him to praise me. Kahan felt a little confused. I then said as an example, compliment my performance. I asked how pretty I was. Seeing my husband at a loss for what to say, I asked if I wasn't pretty. He said no. He just kept saying no. If so, I told him to say it. But he just kept quiet. I also asked if there really was nothing for him to compliment me on. Since he refused to say anything, I asked him if he had lied before. But before I could finish my sentence, my husband complimented me that I was beautiful. Hearing, that took me by surprise, and I almost fell over. But my husband caught my body. My face was blushing too. That was really dangerous. Kahan's face, which was very close, then asked if I was okay. I replied that I was fine. So I asked if I was pretty, and asked him to tell me specifically. Kahan said that my silver hair is attractive, and my eyes look beautiful. Hearing that makes me happy. He then said that my eyes were very clear and bright in color. I was thinking that this man has never complimented anyone in his life. Kahan, who saw my hands, praised that my fingers were very beautiful. I thought that I might have gone too far. I wonder if there really isn't anything to praise for her to think of something random like that. Because I had enough, I thanked him and said that was enough praise. After I thought about it, now that I see her life stem is quite high. The proportions of her face are also very balanced. Her eyes are deeper than I thought. I thought that he was quite handsome. When I thought that, I accidentally said it in front of him, when I realized that my face was red with embarrassment. To change the subject, with my face red and my voice shaking, I asked if he knew my name. I then said that as far as I can remember, he never called my name. Kahan also called my name. And now he also said that my name now is Elena Meinhard. I finally heard him call my name. I also asked him to call when we were together. I don't understand why I'm saying this. After finishing saying what I wanted to say, I said that I would go and thank him for making time for me even though he was busy. I almost forgot, then said that he didn't need to come to my room again before leaving. As I lay on the bed and covered myself with the blanket, I thought that I was too excited in my library. I'm sure because I'm too tired. That's why my thoughts are not right. While I was thinking, a maid asked if she could come in. I let him in and asked what was wrong. The waitress then handed me something and asked to take it. The maid gave me the salve. He said that Duke Meinhard told him to give this to me. After receiving the ointment, I said that he could go. At first I was confused why he gave me something like this. But when I saw my face in the mirror, I screamed and hit the mirror. My surprised maid asked what was wrong. I annoyance told him not to let anyone in. In the mansion that Meinhard chose, the sound of my screams could be heard. On the first day I felt frustrated. He should have told me I had a bump on my forehead. On day 2, I blamed myself. I thought because it's my body, if I'm not aware, then it's my fault. On day 3, I gave up. I convinced myself this must have happened to everyone's life. On day 4, I felt low. I wondered why no one had told me when I had walked such a long way to work at the time. On day 5, finally my lump disappeared. Seeing my smooth forehead again, I became happy. In the middle instead, I came out of my room. The guard who saw me outside asked me where I was going. I also replied that I can't sleep, so I want to go for a walk. The guard offered to escort me, but I declined and said I would just walk down the hall for a bit and then come back. In the hall of the mansion in the middle of the night, it is very quiet. I thought that this is absolutely perfect, because today I decided to attack him. After careful deliberation, I realized I had forgotten the most important thing, and that is my husband's vigilance. I finally arrived in front of my husband's room. My husband became wary of me because of what I did the first night. Because of that, I thought of a plan, and the plan is to stay silent for 5 days. I pretended that I was no longer interested in sleeping with him and pretended that I wasn't in love. With that, he probably thought that I had given up. Seeing as how there were no guards at all, I believe he lowered his guard. I then entered his room. With my smug face, I thought that was the end of him today. Approaching my husband, who was sleeping on the bed, I then climbed onto his bed and thought that all of this would end now. Of course, that is my strategy. While walking in the garden, I feel empty. Annoyed, I kicked a rock. I don't understand why my plan didn't work. On the first day, I was wrapped in a blanket. Then on day 2, I was covered in sheets. I'm annoyed, confused how I can get away from it. I haven't even tried the 3rd time because the result will be the same. While I was thinking, the rock I kicked bounced back and hit my head. While stroking my head where the rock hit me, I thought maybe I should just say it all. Told him the world would end in 20 years and told him to give it up quietly. But I'm pretty sure that's not going to work. Because I was tired, I sat down and sighed. They say that magic beasts have not appeared for 1,000 years. No one will believe me. I thought if only the old lady was here. Thinking that, I also came up with an idea. I just need to look for it through the paintings. I wondered if I should try painting it. I'm sure that's a great idea. I stood up and ran back to the mansion. I need to quickly put my painting skills to the test. But while I was running, a bee blocked my path. I'm confused what's wrong with this bee. The bee then said what? I was very surprised because the bee suddenly spoke and tripped over a rock. When I fell, a man caught me who was falling. He then asked if I was okay. I'm confused as to who this person is. Because I'm okay, I thank you. When the man's hand held my arm, for some reason I felt goosebumps. I'm not sure if it's just my feeling. When I was confused, the man said that it was an honor to meet me. Since I didn't recognize him, I asked him if he knew me. The man smiled and said he heard about me as soon as he arrived at the mansion today. He later introduced himself as Incan Marzon. Hearing his name, I recognized him from Viscount Marzon's family. I heard they visit the Duke's mansion once or twice a year to deliver herbs. It seems they know how to distribute medicinal herbs. I told him I had heard of them, and asked if he was the one who sent the herbs to Duke Meinhard. He replied that I was right, and that was what he came for today. Out of curiosity, I asked if he did it himself. I thought that it would be unusual for the second son of the Viscount to be here for such a reason. She replies that she personally comes to this mansion every now and then. Hearing that I apologized, since I'm still not familiar with the affairs of this mansion, he said that I have absolutely nothing to worry about. I asked him if he would be living in the mansion for a while, and he said he was. I then said that I was sure that it must be a long journey. so I advised her to rest with her while I was here. Inkin also thanked me for my attention. When I left him, I asked what exactly that bad feeling was. Inside my room, I called out to Abby. Abby arrived and asked if I called her. I asked him if he knew anything about Inkin Marzin. Abby got excited and said of course. Abby excitedly explained that her name was Inkin Marzin, age 27. As the second child and eldest son of Viscount Marzin, he had an older sister and a younger brother. He is also single. Abby's explanation ended. I excitedly clapped my hands. I thought that this maid was very competent. Then I realized that he is 8 years older than me. I asked him why he wasn't married yet. I wondered if he was a playboy or something. But Abby answered not like that. Rumor has it that he has a good reputation. Inkin treats his subordinates kindly and is not greedy. I'm not sure what he means by greedy. Abby said that Inkin gave his inheritance rights to his sister Rebecca Marzin. Hearing that, I lay down on the sofa and thought. I was so curious about what goosebumps I felt at that time. It felt weird no matter how hard I thought about it. I then asked Abby to hold my arm right where Inkin was holding mine. After Abby grabbed my arm, I asked her to touch it even lower. Then I asked him to squeeze my arm a little tighter. After tasting it, I knew it wouldn't feel like back then. I woke up and said that was enough. I asked what because it wasn't a man squeezing her. Talking about a man, I also remember my husband. After that, I stood up and decided to meet him. When I arrived at my husband's room, I asked if it was okay if I came in. He also let me in. After being given permission, I sat beside him. I feel that the atmosphere is a little awkward. I think that this is very embarrassing. I think this is the first time I've walked into this place with a normal attitude. My husband finally decided to break the silence and asked what was wrong. Hesitating, I asked him to give me his hand. My husband looks a little confused. He also gave me his hand. I touched his hand. Keihan looked slightly surprised. I don't feel anything. Her hands were quite soft. I then realized that there was something rough in his hands. I asked if his hands were calluses. I'm thinking it must be because he uses the sword too much. I've never seen him use a sword, but it sure suits him. With broad shoulders, long arms, and strong muscles. My husband calling me brought me back to reality. He asked if there was something in his hand. I was so embarrassed and let go of his hand. As a reason, I said that I was just checking it out for fun. I then said that his hands were much bigger and tougher than mine, so I was just wondering if it was fun to touch it. I took her hand again and pointed out the difference in my size with hers. He also accepted my reasons. I thought my hands were much smaller than hers, and it tickled a little. I then remembered and said that I have a request. I stretched out my arm and asked him to hold my arm once. My husband also looked at me suspiciously, but I said that I didn't mean anything strange today, and I had my reasons. I also reminded him that he said he would give me anything. Keihan finally agreed and touched my arm. I feel that it doesn't taste the same. I asked him to hold it a little lower. After the dye touched in the right place, I asked him to press harder. I feel that it's pretty good. My husband suddenly distanced himself. Seeing him running away, I said that I am not a pathogen. I then said that he was acting like this now, after hugging and sleeping with me that night. Since my business was done, I thanked him and said I would go now. After seeing his wife leaving the room, Keihan sighed with his face red. In the end, I found nothing. Because I was hungry, I wanted to eat something first. As I was walking, I heard the maids chatting. They mentioned something about criminals that intrigued me and peeked into their conversation. The maid then said that he looked good and handsome on the outside. But who would have thought that he was doing human trafficking? The other maid said it was terrible and asked how she didn't get caught by him. The maid replied that their hands accidentally touched. Then he suddenly felt goosebumps all over his body. The other maid agreed that goosebumps were a sign of danger. The maid then warns to be careful outside. If she feels strange when someone touches her, it means that her female instinct is warning her to run away. After hearing the maid's chatter, Inkin suddenly called out to me from behind, causing me a huge shock. Seeing that I was shocked, he apologized for startling me. I replied that it was fine because I was just daydreaming. Inkin then asked if I wanted to eat, and I said yes. Hearing my answer, he looked happy and said that he was also heading to the dining area and asked me to go with him. Remembering the warnings from the two maids' chat, I refused with the excuse that I suddenly had no appetite. I then said that he should enjoy his meal and said goodbye. Inkin asked me to wait, but I have already run away. The goosebumps, the woman's gut feeling. I feel like it's just bullshit. What's more, deceiving others with a good reputation. Remembering what Abby had said, I turned back to Inken. He smiled when he saw me looking at him. When I ate together with my husband, I thought something was wrong. I'm not sure if I should keep an eye on him, but it would be dangerous if I were found out. I also asked my husband how long Inken would stay in this mansion. He replied that since Inken had delivered the medicinal plants, he would leave immediately. Hearing my husband mention medicinal herbs, I realized that Inken had sent medicinal herbs to the mansion. If he had bad intentions and secretly did something with the medicinal herbs, then the impact on this mansion would not be small. My husband, who saw me daydreaming, called me. I thought that the rumors about my husband got worse because of that. I thought that my cursed husband was just some bullshit. My worried husband asked if I was worried. I was thinking, what if Inken really is a criminal? If that's the case, I have to prevent that crisis. My husband might just reward me. Just thinking about it makes me so excited. Seeing me acting strangely, my husband, who looked worried, asked if I was okay. I replied, of course, I'm fine. In my heart I said, just wait, you Inken Marzan. Hearing my answer, my husband seemed to be thinking about something. I then carried out my plan and asked my servant to investigate about Inken Marzan. Rumors, connections, and activities during his stay in this mansion. The maid understood and accepted my assignment. After that, I gave a painting of the fortune-teller's old woman. I asked him to take the painting to the butler and told him to find this person as hard as he could. At lunch, I invited Inken to eat together. Inken, who had been invited to eat, said that this was an honor for him. I told him not to hesitate because it is my duty to serve my guests. He said that he didn't deserve this attention, but I said that I was the one who decided that. Moreover, I got his favor earlier and asked him to take it as my gratitude. Hearing that, Inken looks surprised. He then smiles and says he understands and thanks. Out of curiosity, Inken asked where Duke Meinhard was. I replied he would not attend this meeting. With my evil smile, I said in my heart that I would dig up everything about him. Inken asked if Duke Meinhard was currently busy. I jokingly replied and asked if he was sad that my husband wasn't here. He also denied it and said that was not the case while laughing. In my heart, I thought that I should really pay attention to it. If one thing is suspicious, then only one thing. While I was eating, I suddenly heard the sound of breaking glass. Inken, who dropped it, apologized to the waiter and asked if there was a sore spot. He then said that he should have been more careful, and he was sorry. But the maid said that was fine, but it was her fault and offered to clean it up. Inken also gave the broken glass, which was wrapped in a cloth. Upon receiving it from Inken, the maid blushed. I wonder if it's something that can make someone blush. When I look at him, he's quite tall. I felt that he was becoming more and more suspicious. After cleaning up the broken glass, Inken sat back down. He then said that he felt it every time he ate. But the chef's skill here was truly amazing. He then admired my wisdom in choosing people. I denied it and said that it was Duke's abilities that were always outstanding. Not only that, I'd say that the meat here is always tender and the desserts are quite sweet. What's more, the garden here is very well cared for. Hearing what I said, Inken offered me to go for a short walk after eating. I also accepted his invitation. While walking in the garden, I asked if she could come to the castle at any time to deliver herbs. He answered it was true. I asked again if it didn't bother him because he had to go back and forth long distances like this. He replied that it was not a problem because it was the thing he wanted to do. Hearing that made me wonder why she would want to deliver herbs to Duke Meinhard's castle. I said that I was sure it could be easier if he had underlings to do it with. But he said that he would lose the things he loved. Hearing that, I asked if delivering herbs was something she liked. He also answered correctly. Out of curiosity, I asked if he didn't mind answering what made him like it. Hearing that, Inken was silent. He then replied that herbs are things that everyone needs. Man, woman, young, old, that plant can relieve everyone's pain and also save their lives. As he explained, a butterfly took off on his finger. He said he liked her because of that. And in delivering something important, he also carries a responsibility. After explaining, the butterfly flew away. He also asked, isn't it funny because he's responsible for work that everyone can do? I denied it and said it wasn't funny. I told him he was lucky to do such a noble job. He also thanked me for saying that. So I thought this was nothing. The intuition of a woman or a criminal is just an illusion. While I was thinking, the talking bee appeared in front of me again and said that he met me again. I was shocked and fell again. And just like before, Incan caught me again. When he held me, I felt goosebumps again, like before. After I stood up again, Incan asked if I was okay. I replied that I was fine and thanked him. Incan, who saw me acting strangely, felt confused. I really don't understand why the way he touched me was so unpleasant. By the time I had returned to my room, I was annoyed at that bastard bee. That's why I asked Gardner to do something about the bees here earlier. After that incident, I hoped that he would not touch me again from now on. A moment later, Abby knocked on the door and asked permission to enter. I also let him in. Abby returned to provide the information I requested. When I asked if he found anything, he replied that he didn't find anything suspicious. However, there was one thing that caught his attention. Hearing that made me curious. Abby later said that she wasn't sure if this was related. I said that it was fine, and asked him to continue what he was saying. Abby says, after Incan came to this mansion, one maid left her job within 2 months. I asked her if she was sure she was out, and Abby was quite sure. Abby then gives a file saying it is. Inside the file was the date the herbs were shipped and the date the maid came out. There are maids who leave after 6 weeks, and maids who leave after 2 months. Due to the large number of maids' jobs, maids leaving wasn't anything out of the ordinary. The timing is also irregular, so it's difficult to conclude. However, there is one thing that bothers me. I also asked Abby